The story begins in a place where a guy and a girl, still quite young in appearance, stood side by side, lifting their swords. The girl thoughtfully said that she was beating on one side for the first time with the Rhine. The young man nodded and recalled that they were rivals before. The girl smiled cute and assured that they were now together, on one side. The guy also smiled and agreed with her words. The street was buzzing under the bright sun. Two huge armies came up on the abandoned field. People in different uniforms faced their face. Everyone held a different weapon in their hands, and a fierce confrontation broke out between them. Suddenly, everyone looked around at the same time. A loud explosion came. From what they saw, they were surprised. Looking at, they breathed hard. The bridge was destroyed, and now it was impossible to get to its base. Suddenly, the Rhine was strongly forward. A cunning smile appeared on his face, and a heavy two-handed weapon lay on his shoulders. When the warriors recognized Altain's hero, a joyful noise swept into the army. Meanwhile, a girl with elfy ears sat high in the sky. She kept on her charming pelvis, which allowed her to soar freely over the ground. Watching what was happening, she confidently stated that she will not let him just go and destroy everything in her way. The young man smiled widely, turning to Elria. He was glad and said with warmth in his voice that he finally waited for her arrival. When he returned, his armor rang, filling the silence with a light bell. Elria looked at him and confirmed. Yes, she really came. Smiling, she carefully corrected her hair, filling it by her ear. The girl explained that she heard earlier as if she had to appear here. She easily raised her hand, and at the same moment there was many magical circles behind her back. Smiling, the girl said that today she prepared a truly special spell. Rael, with the same smile, said that he could no longer wait for her. He then asked if they could finally find out which of them was stronger, as there were hundreds of equal matches between them. She lowered her gaze and calmly reported that the 629 battle would be held today. The Rhine wondered if they really had so many battles. The guy smiled a little and thanked her for being reminded of him every time she had gone together. After a short pause, Emery noted that he reminds him only because he forgets every time. In response, he exclaimed that he could not do anything with it because, unlike her, not so stupid as to keep it all in his head. Then he smiled wide, lowered his sword from his shoulder, and said that it did not matter at all, because in the battlefield he would never allow himself to show pity for someone. He said that this rule would act until he is called a hero. Elias smiled in response and noted that her name is the Sage, so she simply has no right to concede to him in this battle. In the Altai Empire, which was famous for its powerful army, once lived a man whom everyone knew as a hero. He participated in many battles and had never been defeated until the end of his life and never fell on his knees. In the house, the country who fought with Altain, lived a girl nicknamed the Sage. She was understood by magic, and through her knowledge helped her homeland improve the situation in the war. The Sage spread new magical techniques, and this made it much stronger. These two were constantly met on the battlefield. They knew neither sleep nor rest, as if they had found joy in endless battles with each other. The only person for whom the hero Reinfrieden could go for everything was the Sage of Elric Aldwin. However, their relationship could not last forever. After all, the moment would still come when one of them would become stronger. A fairly adult man looked around and asked if the Sage died. His face expressed full surprise. A man in shape stood right in front of him. The young guy just gave him the news. The Sage died. The man was carefully asking whether Liat was sure of the same young man who conveyed these words and the truth of this news. The age of the Catchket came to his eyes and agreed a little. Then he added that this is tested information. After all, the message came from a spy, which previously successfully penetrated the insert. The man slowly sank on the chair, as if the earth had disappeared from under his feet, and stopped in thought, unable to believe and heard. He was still convinced that he was destined to become the first victim of this protracted and grueling war. Suddenly, Lee reported that a royal decree of His Highness of Frieden was sent from the country immediately after the news of the Sage. The man asked again, and thought whether he became just old, who was no longer capable of nothing, after the death of the Sage. Leont denied that this was not true. He explained that by the royal order, after the death of the Sage, he should take advantage of a disorder in a neighboring country and lead the army to invade Wait to put an end to a protracted war. Hearing this, a man with anger clenched his teeth and leaned about the Supreme Altine himself. Liana lowered her gaze again and added that there is no doubt. This is really their best chance. Liat said that, despite everything, everyone who at least once visited the battlefield knew. Both did not want human lives to die because of the power they could show. It was because of this, according to him, that Monsieur decided to call the Sage in a duel. He could no longer restrain his emotions and finally fired that this was the cause of his deep despair. With tears in his eyes, he said that the death of a great sage is a reason for war, especially with those who seek peace with lightness. Instead, everyone has to mourn its loss. The man rose from his place, smiled, and said that Liot had just said a few pleasant words, and he would definitely need to tell her. He dropped away all the armor, took the sword in his hands, and quietly headed to the exit. Suddenly, the ice asked Lord Frieden where he gathered. The man looked around, waved his hand, and said with a smile that he just decided to take a walk. He inserted the sword in the ground, and said that you should not prepare for the battle if you are going to meet a true friend. After these words, he went to the border between Altina and the Waite. When he approached the walls, arrows flew into his direction. But he only accelerated the step, and from that the soldiers on the faces appeared pale. They guessed that it could be a rapid grain brought from the Altan Empire. Running the distance, the Rhine cleverly pulled up on the wall. The warriors could not believe their eyes. They were stunned by what they had just seen. When the man was already on the walls, the sorcerers were ordered to destroy him. The Rhine easily evaded the spell, and the sorcerers fell to the ground. He already swung, but stopped suddenly. He froze in place, and suddenly the piercing pain pierced his back. One behind him was holding staff. The magician looked at Rain Frieden's hero and asked why he came and invaded their country. He turned when he heard the familiar voice of little Tiana. She wondered if she came to take the place of her dead teacher. The girl was silent, and then suddenly she could not stand and wept, pleading to ask him. Other magicians rushed to attack this man. The powerful explosion struck the wall, lifting a cloud of dust into the air. When the dust was settled, everyone saw the Rhine. He was injured, but still stood on his feet. Smiling, he looked at Tien, who was bitterly crying. The Rinka slowly passed the magicians that surrounded Tian, and calmly stated that he had only come to say goodbye to the sage. He stressed that this is his only reason to stay here. After saying this, he removed the remnants of magic. In the royal capital, unusual silence prevailed. Suddenly, a downpour came from heaven, which with incredible force struck on the high wall of the city. This powerful blow completely broke a strong protective wall, and the protection of the capital fell as if a card house, exposing the city of danger. The guards surrounded him and ordered not to move. All together raised their weapons. But suddenly their faces were whitewashed. They guessed who he was. The Rhine walked confidently while the guards gave way to him. The man apologized and explained that he had very little time, so he asked to allow him to go on. The guards barely held back their feelings, and suddenly one of them, squeezing, asked the Rhine loudly that he was going to do with their great sage. Bloody Rain confessed that before his death he dreamed of talking to her only once, which is why he asked them not to interfere with him. He took a few steps to the coffin and saw El Rey there, whom he greeted politely and sincerely. He leaned down and asked if she had died. He did not rest the question. And suddenly she will take and come to life right now? He said that the guys she raised were really very strong, but they still do not compare them. Added, it is difficult to stay during training because you can accidentally harm them. He sank to the floor and said that Illyria was something incredible, beyond the idea. He added that many people still remember her with great respect. At this point, everyone around could no longer restrain the feelings, so they cried quietly. The Rhine said they never found out who was stronger, but he was glad that he was able to fight her for over 50 years. Remembering his youth, he thought, if they lived in another world, he would probably become real friends. In the thoughts of Illyria, he imagined how she extends his hand and suggests, let's find out which one of us is stronger. The Rhine lay on the land from which his blood flowed, and, exhaling the last time, he died near El Ria. The complete darkness prevailed before his eyes, but suddenly a girl who congratulated him gentle, good morning. The Rhine was crying, but suddenly it froze from surprise. Something surprised him. In confusion, he thought he died here. He was an old man a minute ago. He tried to understand who this girl was in front of him, and a stranger with a smile said that it was time to rain milk. She lifted a bottle of milk high above her head and announced with a wide smile that there was a special breast milk here. Seeing this, the Rhine faded instantly. He screamed loudly in protest, though he could not understand where he found himself and who this woman was nearby. 18 years have passed. The Rain stood with the axe in his hands, watching the others in the forest. Suddenly the guy turned. Someone called him by name. One day a man approached the Rhine and asked if he could cut down this tree. The guy approached, agreed to help, and carefully removed his axe from his shoulder. Then he asked the man to move away a little. After listening to the Rhine, he returned without hesitation and agreed quickly. At this point, several workers watched the Rhine slowly approach the spreading tree and swung an axe. His strength was simply incredible. He had only to wave the axe as the air around him seemed to be bent and trembled. The Rhine gently hit the tree with an axe, and the deaf sound spreads the forest, breaking the silence. After several blows, the Rhine lowered his hand with the axe, easily pressed on the top of the tree, and it quickly fell on the ground. Several men came to the Rhine and began to say how lucky they were to have it. Another added that it is still difficult for him to believe how the Rhine copes with all this without any magic, because they would like to be able to do so. The Rhine only shrugged and replied that he could not do anything. He simply could not use magic. Then he effortlessly lifted the tree as if it were a match, and calmly asked where to take it. One of the men already wanted to say something, but the Rhine ahead of him, loudly screaming to wait for a moment. He loudly exclaimed that a squirrel was hiding in the hollow of the tree. The little creature hid in a tree and quietly eaten its nut, and the Rhine was interested in looking at the one who said it. Meanwhile, men were confused and shouted that the most important thing here is a new kind of creature. Someone else exclaimed that it was an incredible find, and should be reported immediately into the newspaper. The Rhine, which watched all this, inadvertently thought how calm he lives here. He carried this tree, thinking that he is confident. In this life, he will spend all the days in this way, in peace and harmony. At the same time, silence prevailed in one of the considerable homes of the city. The girl with long hair stopped and began to consider the newspaper, on the page of which there was an announcement of a new type of squirrel. At that moment, she looked at the Rhine, who accidentally found herself in the frame and looked confused. The girl lifted the newspaper and gladly exclaimed that she was reigning. At this point, someone called him loudly in the guy's house by name. The guy hurried to get out of the room and immediately asked his mother, who was all in the alarm. The woman grabbed him and tears shone in her eyes. She begged for him to explain what he had done, and the Rhine only shrugged and honestly replied that he did not remember anything special. The mother exclaimed that this morning, a noble from the royal capital came to them, to look for Rhine. Everyone advised him to go to the house of the village. Then the Rhine explained that, in fact, this man was a magician who fights magic monsters using his magic. He stated that he did not understand what he was here, and asked his mother's opinion. The woman was confused and hastily agreed. He also considers it a misunderstanding. But the aristocrat turned to a boy named, and the Rhine reassured. They say it means nothing. His mother exclaimed that he was too calm. Although she was very worried, the guy just thought about it. He believed that you would not surprise him more than that morning when he woke up and learned that 1,000 years have passed. His native motherland, the former Altane Empire, has long been destroyed and absorbed by the neighboring state. Now this country is called the Magical Kingdom of Wait, and magic has become a common part of life for everyone. Therefore, little can surprise him, because in his past life, his mind was almost 9-year-old. He said it doesn't matter, but first of all, you should go to the village, old man. Let people not wait in vain. The woman exclaimed that if he had done something wrong, he could just pretend that his mom didn't know about it. But the Rhine calmly replied that he was indifferent. The woman fell on his knees in front of him and exclaimed that it was very sad, and they need to redeem their sins together. And the Rhine in response said he had to recognize his mistakes and refute everything. He walked the village, and the peasants were surprised to inspect him and asked that he had done. The Rhine realized that rumors were already spreading the village, and it was very surprised. For the first time in his life, he saw a charming carriage. It was clear at once. Such a luxury belongs to some influential aristocrat. The old man ran to the Rhine and in despair asked what he had done. The guy said the leader was the second person to talk about it. The man replied that he didn't care because he thought he would die soon. The Rhine wondered if someone was important. The man noted that before them, not just an aristocrat, but a member of the distant royal family of the glorious magical kingdom of Wait, and the Rhine would be able to say hello to him. The Rhine asked why such a person could need it. The leader only shrugged. He did not know the answer. The only thing he was told, when the Rhine meets with that person, he will understand everything. He said that it would not happen to this guy. He would never throw any of his fellow villagers. For these sincere words, the Rhine thanked the old age of the village. He went to the room and apologized to Worried. The girl turned and looked carefully at him. She smiled and told the Rhine that they had not seen themselves for a long time. The Rhine frozen in silence, seeing this girl. He could not say a single word, just looked at her silently. Suddenly, she came closer and asked what happened, thus turning it to her senses. He tried to say something. However, he stopped at the hair and apologized for his behavior. The girl was surprised and wondered why he suddenly started talking so officially. The Rhine explained that he was forced to follow in his own words, because he talks to a representative of the noble family of Coldwell. Hearing this, the girl was upset and asked if she really remembered anything. He bowed politely and asked if they met before. Hearing this, the girl was very upset. And suddenly the Rhine said, Does she look for a hero? After these words, the girl seemed to be comforting her eyes, although she looked confused for a moment. Sumi returned to her face, and she said quietly that the ranger she knew never said so. Suddenly, the guy suddenly cut off that now they just walk in a circle. The girl was happy to smile and said that she was talking right now as she remembered. The Rhine explained that it was because he is the same guy she mentioned. Like Altana's character, he changes his tone according to the situation and the interlocutor. The girl was infinitely happy that he was standing in front of her. The Rhine also smiled and wondered if she was the same Elria he remembered. The girl introduced herself, saying that she was a Veil and for about 200 years. She shared that she loves to read books, drink warm tea with milk, and when tired, she often falls asleep just under the sun. The Rhine is silent by listening carefully to its history. The Rhine assured that only her name and place of birth knew about Elria, and nothing more. Hearing this, Elria apologized. She crossed her hands on her chest and suggested that if they want to know, let them just beat. The Rhine replied that it would be easier, but there was no place where it could use magic. Elri crossed her hands on her chest and confidently stated that if the rain can dispel her spell in just 10 seconds, she recognizes him without hesitation. After a while, the boys went out to the field where the trees grew far apart. Rins said it was a good place to imperceptibly apply a little magic. Elria looked around and asked where they were. The Rains explained that he was working here. Elria turned and asked what the Rhine was doing. The guy replied that he was a land, and still cuts trees and wears different loads. Suddenly, silence reigned in El Rio, and he asked what had happened. The Rhine replied that the reason was that it could not use magic. He smiled and assured that, to be honest, he remained as strong as in his past life, so she should not be kept restraining. Elria nodded as a sign of consent and warned that she would start now. She lifted her staff, and a huge ball of magic appeared above her head. She confidently directed the magical flow to the other direction, and at the same moment he changed his rack and crossed his hands, collecting all his strength in one fist. He swung and hit Elria's charming card. A moment, and the magic had disappeared, as if they were never, and only silence remained around. Rin smiled gently and asked in Ehli how many times they had already competed with each other. The girl answered with a smile that they have fought 329 times. Renzide shrugged and confessed that he still remembered nothing. Elria laughed and said that she always knew everything, because it was always her business. She smiled widely and said that she was very glad that he was Rain. They sat on 2 old logs, and the Rhine confessed that he never thought he could see her again. Elria said that she had survived the reincarnation, which is why she decided that he could also be here. The guy considered it incredible. She acted so boldly without even having any evidence. But suddenly he was interested in another. He asked how she managed to find him. Elrea proudly said that she saw the squirrel in the photo in the newspaper and recognized the rain from this publication. The guy asked if she was even watching rural newspapers. The girl replied that she fully trusted her intuition. The Rhine turned to Elria and asked what she meant when she mentioned the rebirth. The girl explained that to put it easier, it is the transfer of all memories and abilities from past life to a new one. If you speak exactly, it is called the magic of reincarnation. The Rhine said that it was Elria who used this magic. Suddenly, the girl confidently said that everything was not right, and it was not her who used the charm. The magic of reincarnation. So it has yet called this art. Theoretically, such magic really exists, but how it works, it is still unknown. The Rhine said that Lorea really knows only the consequences of using reincarnation magic, but the process and method of using this magic remain a mystery to it. The guy wondered if it was true. Then he added that if you think well, even a sage who once created magic, he cannot use it himself. Aurea pushed her lips and confessed that even her, wise and experienced, there are things that she cannot understand. She explained that if it was really a real reincarnation spell, it would look just as in her past life, but now her appearance is a little different. The Rhine wondered if it was true. The girl looked at him and wondered if it was true. The rain was gradually shattering, and Elria was red, hoping that the guy would notice how she changed. Suddenly, the Rhine paid attention to one thing and asked if it was born again by man, not an elf. She nodded quickly, confirming this guess. The girl explained that that is why they have the same ears from the Rhine. Remember the guy who could not spell? He somehow asked what the results of the magical test he had. The Rhine asked if it was the same exam they were still in children. He remembered how he had once touched the test device, but he broke down, and then he was quarreled and called a bad man. After that, he said that it would be better for him to stay in this village than to put everyone in danger because of his magic. Although the magical creatures around the world is now much calmer than in their past life. Suddenly, Elri stated that the Rhine was a real hero. The guy uncertainly noted that it has long been over. Elrea immediately was angry and stated that he was as strong, but the Rhine calmly added that it does not change anything. He said that above all, only the sage has the right to fight. Hearing this, Illyrius's face suddenly frowned. She rose sharply and called the Rhine. Suddenly she told him, "Marry me." The Rhine was so surprised that she froze in place, and then asked if she had heard what she was saying. She said that from now on the rain would become her bride. The guy stopped her and noted, "It is not necessary to talk about it as if everything was already decided in advance." She said that if he was really Keldwin, and these relatives have ties with the royal family, then his level of magic is not so important. The guy will be able to take an entrance exam to the academy easily. She added that the Rhine had a chance to prove its abilities and become a real magician. She proudly announced that it was the perfect plan, but the Rhine asked if it looked like a deception. Elri assured that no deception is discussed and that they did not break anything. She explained that the reason was the power of the Rhine. He has struggled with her for over 50 years. She also remembered that everyone called Rhine a true hero. Now no one recognizes him because he is unable to use magic, and she is completely dissatisfied with it. The Rhine lowered his head and confessed to Elria that he was very pleased with her words, but could not accept her proposals. But suddenly she stopped him, suggested to find out which one is stronger. The Rhine immediately remembered their common past. The guy got up and asked her whether she considers it unfair. Elria replied that it was not true because she was sure that the rain feels the same as she. There were times when both were called a sage or hero, and the loss of at least one of them could have caused the decline of the whole country. That is why, even when they competed honestly, they tried not to take everything to their heart. However, if their desires were really taken into account, it would be much easier. Meanwhile, the guy stood slowly and firmly stated that he was not going to run or hide. He smiled and assured that he was always ready to accept her call. Many people gathered near the house. The elder summoned the Rhine and wondered if something wrong had happened. The guy said he had already decided. He would go to the capital with Mrs. Baldwin. The girl was red, embarrassing from her own offer. The boys left the house together, and Elrea was amazed at what was happening. A crowd of people who asked the Rhine gathered around whether he really went to the capital. Everyone was fond of Elrea and very much wanted to meet her. The young man turned to them and immediately noticed that Illyria was blushed. He turned and reported that they were going, but noted that if they stand so close to each other, they would not be able to take a magic carriage. The Rhine reached back and the elite hesitated, but still carefully touched his palm. She took him by her hand and a light wave of rest enveloped her heart. The leader jumped sharply forward and ordered the whole voice to execute the Rhine's order. Elrea was immediately scared. The head of the village confidently approached, dispersing everyone who interfered with the boys. The Rhine turned and, smiling, led Elrea behind him. The girl thanked him clumsily, calming up. A worrying pallor gradually disappeared from her face. The boys were traveling together in a carriage, and silence prevailed around. Unexpectedly, the Rhine admitted that he still cannot believe everything that is happening around. Elrea nervously lowered her gaze on the floor and decided that it is best to remain silent now. The Rhine turned and called it by its name, but it did not respond. Then he repeated, but already stronger. The girl grabbed her head. The Rhine wondered if it was hearing it at all. Elrea turned sharply and said that she had heard everything. He stood quite close and looked carefully at her, from which the girl's cheeks were even stronger. The Rhine retreated back and wondered. Even before her reincarnation, she felt uncomfortable among strangers. The girl dropped below and apologized to him. The guy thought a little, then asked Elrea if she remembered his words that he could not use magic, and whether he had any assumptions about it. In response, the girl wondered if she had a reason why he was deprived of magic. She looked at him and said she believed, all this because of his magical abilities. The Rhine looked at her, lifting his eyebrows in surprise, and asked what she was referring to. Elri began to explain. First of all, the magic device works as a conductor for human magical energy. To better understand, ordinary magic is similar to water, but a magic device is like a channel that this water moves. The magic of the guy is more like a stone. It does not flow like water, and if you try to spend it through the water supply, everything will just break. The Rhine remembered how a thing broke during the exam, and suddenly realized why it happened. It was a little sense. Elrea confessed that she did not understand why he possesses such magic, but emphasized that if he's going to use it, she will have to create a device that will fit him under his unique style. He confessed that it was amazing, but he was interested in how much time it would take for it. The girl replied that although she managed to create her own theory of magic, it took it for 100 years. The guy smiled and said he understood everything and then thanked her. After all, She had solved the riddle, which he has been looking for 18 years. The girl looked carefully at the Rhine and wondered if he really wanted to use magic. Hearing this question, the Rhine only froze in place and silently turned his gaze to Illyria. The Rhine laid his hands behind his back, sighed heavily, and replied that it all depends on how to formulate it. He then added that he was interested in finding out what feelings the use of different types of magic brings. Illyria smiled, clearly interested in his owls. She stated that no matter how hard, even with magic, she would not be able to defeat her. And the Rhine just looked at her, smiled gently, and replied that she should not be so confident in her words. Suddenly, Illyria grabbed the Rhine at the edge of his shirt and called quietly named. She looked straight into his eyes and sincerely thanked for her readiness to help. The Rhine frozen on the spot, looking at it. After a short pause, he said he had to thank. Without hiding surprise, he confessed that her unexpected proposal was truly caught by him, and the girl suddenly exclaimed that she did it only for the sake of having another opportunity to draw on. The guy smiled and replied that he would do as she said, and then he added, "This is the only way for such a simple guy as he to become a real magician." Then he added that whatever it was, it will help to find a solution to the problem. Illyria looked at him in surprise and wondered what problems he was talking about. The Rhine told them they both had transformed 1,000 years later, and it was quite logical to assume that such an event could not happen by accident. He remembered the past and suggested that there was exactly someone's influence in this case, so we need to find this person and find out why she did it. Since the Rhine was a simple girl, it was difficult to understand the cause immediately, so he would have to turn to her personally. The Rhine then turned to his girlfriend and remembered that her family had a connection with the royal dynasty. It was very interested in him. Remembering the royal daughter, Illyria smiled and said that Tiana had previously accepted their name. The Rhine mentioned Tian, who met the day when he came to say goodbye to Illyria. Then the girl smiled gently and said that from now on the kind of Baldwin would be named after the sages. The Rhine looked away and said a little awkward that he was now engaged to a girl from such a noble family. Illyria just smiled and assured the boy that everything was fine. The Rhine looked carefully at Illyria again, returning to the previous issue again. He asked if he would be the problem that he was her bride. Illyria looked at him a little confusedly and replied that, of course, there could be no problem. She calmly closed her eyes and said that if she was really worried that they were fierce enemies in her past life, she would never have made his suggestion. Listening to her, the Rhine looked out the window. His cheeks were slightly bad. He quietly confessed that it was also trusted by Illyria because of this. Hearing these words, the girl felt the excitement, and a light blush appeared on her cheeks. After that, she smiled sincerely and thanked the Rhine for trusting her. The young man looked at her with a gentle smile, and also thanked her trust. Suddenly, he felt awkward and confessed to her that she probably did not know it, but in his past life he was never engaged to anyone. Illyria was in surprise, rounded her eyes, and asked if he really was talking seriously. The young man said it was not surprising, because then his days passed in constant clashes with enemies and endless drawing of himself. Because of this, he did not always hear the refusal. Arya turned away, repeating his words. The Rhine said it was just memories of the past, and then asked if they remembered it in this life. Hearing this, Illyria was red and tensed, but she never found what to answer. The Rhine was surprised by Illyria's reaction and thought about it. The girl said timidly that he was still remembered, and stories about the Rhine still go between people. She blushed when she told that the real problem was that for 1,000 years of history about him were too dramatic, and it was difficult to compare with what really happened. The guy looked intently at her and asked if she could give any examples of such stories. He understood that because he belonged to a hostile state, he could be speaking without any conscience. Speaking of it, it looked noticeably upset. But Illyria suddenly broke him and assured him that everything was not the way he thinks. The Rhine felt him anxious these thoughts. Suddenly the carriage stopped sharply. Illyria exclaimed that they seemed to have come. Together, the boys got out of the car to the street. They walked a little more forward, and then Illyria stopped, pointing to the house and saying it was her home. The young man looked at the building with enthusiasm, astonished so much that he could not even utter a word. There was a huge and beautiful house in front of them. Everything was covered with flowers, and the streets seemed clean and tidy. Illyria immediately rushed to the entrance. When the boys came a little closer to the entrance, a loud revisco suddenly sounded. They froze in place and looked up, looking for where this sound comes from. Suddenly, a middle-aged man landed them, who radiated joy seeing Illyria. The girl smiled gently and informed her father that she finally returned home, while the Rhine looked at the man who had just landed before them. Illyria's father, Keldwin, looked closely at her daughter and said that she still had the news she did not voice. He asked if he was true, and remembered that he heard she was going on a journey again. Elria quickly agreed with him, confirming that it really was. Galleon smiled and praised the girl loudly for his sincerity. Elri assured that she accurately left the note and even warned all the inhabitants of the estate. The man praised her again, noting that she had taken care of everything, so they did not worry about her. After that, Elria was just as confidently stated that she had brought her fiancé. Hearing this, Galleon said that her request was not satisfied. Elria added that she had already brought this man. Galleon was surprised and asked when she had time to do it. Elria smiled mysteriously and raised the Rhine forward, immediately calling his name. The guy politely greeted and said that I was glad. Helene was still smiling when he pointed to the exit and told the Rhine to get out of here. But the guy apologized and replied that he couldn't do it. After listening to the guy, the man understood everything. Going to the door of the estate, he dissolved them widely and greeted the rain that the drumming outside. The guy inadvertently noted himself how responsive was Galleon. The man confessed that he would never allow her daughter to marry a man without a trim. However, he was aware that he was not the head of the family, which means that he could not make decisions concerning Keldwin's house. A girl came to the door of the estate. She was approaching slowly descending the stairs. Stopping next to Halion, the girl asked him, "What's the fuss here?" Galleon gladly noticed Alicia and said that he heard Elria brought with her the groom. The girl made a step forward, listening to her husband's words. After that, she took a folded fan and politely asked her husband to leave, because he was too noisy. The mother of Elria, Alicia Keldwin, took a step forward, introduced herself, and noted that she was the head of Kelvin's family. The Rhine was kneeling and leaning in the bow, betraying that he introduced so late. He then voiced his full name, Frieden. Hearing the boy's name, Alicia said she had never heard of Rhine's family before. The guy, without lifting his gaze, said that he came from the mountain village in the Aral region and comes from a simple peasant family. That is why, he explained, the head of Keldwin's family has never heard about him before. When he finished, Alicia could not help but notice. As a simple guy from the village, he was too confident. The guy explained that at least from courtesy as a guest, he had to say hello. However, he has not raised his eyes all this time. Alicia turned to her daughter and said that she was much smarter than her, and then asked if she agreed. Elrea wondered with a smile. Is he really a wonderful guy? Alicia felt and said to Eli that she had just offended her. She confessed that she was very worried about her daughter's future. Elrea only sighed and replied that she understands her feelings. Alicia stood and tried to restrain her anxiety thoughts, and suddenly Illyria turned to her sharply and directly stated, she finally found rain. Alicia squeezed a fan in her hand, and then, a little silent, turned to the Rhine and asked him to lift her head and relax. The guy thanked her and got up. Alicia turned and said that for their family it would be a shame to turn away from the one who showed respect for the icy winds. She then asked him to first allow them to accept him as a guest of a family of an icy wind. It passed for a while and they went to the mansion. The Rhine was already sitting at a small table, and Alicia settled opposite him. The guy asked her a little aware whether the Elri and Galleon would appear at the meeting. Alicia closed her eyes and explained that they both difficult to talk, so it may be easier if they turn away from themselves. She also admitted that she just wanted to understand what was happening and how everything came to this condition. Hearing her answer, Ray realized that justification like "I know nothing" would not work here. So the guy honestly noted that he decided to train only to be able to use the name and status of the boilers. Alicia was silent and then asked if she guessed it was Elri's idea. He assured that he was telling the truth and even suggested Alicia to ask Elria to confirm it. But Alicia only waved her hand. She did not need evidence because the reason was simple. He was Rhine. The man looked at her in surprise, not understanding what she would like. Alicia said that when Elrea was small, she suddenly stated she wanted to find a man named Rhine Frieden. However, when Alicia wondered why she needed it, Elrea only shook her head and did not give any answer. She was sure he was there. That is why Alicia decided that it was just someone's murmur, and did not take it seriously. She said directly that this baby is strange from her birth. Alicia said that Elijah had a whim to magic since childhood, never cried, even when she was very small, and was so special that her mother was even a little afraid of her. The Rhine listened carefully to this story, stunned, and gradually began to understand Elria and her feelings. 1,000 years have passed since her past life, and here, Alari wakes up in a world where there is no familiar soul. Even when she is in such a difficult situation, she does not stop the search without having a single hook, just the feeling that the rain is really nearby. Listening to Alicia's story, the Rhine only smiled gently and asked as if he were really like that. Instead, the woman just smiled back, noticing his reaction. She said that if it is indeed the same rain, then it would agree to bless their engagement. The guy was surprised and asked if she was really ready to trust her home to a boy without a high kind, just based on the words of Elria. Alicia just smiled and said that this is what Elria wanted. For her, as for her mother, it was quite natural to fulfill the cherished desire of her daughter. After that, she wondered if he shared her opinion. After that, Alicia wondered, what about the ream itself? He also mentioned that only Elijah was Rivna, and that they had long been divorced. However, just as Elor searched him tirelessly, he also always remembered her. As a kid, he often watched the other children playing on the street, and he thought that she would think of this quiet world if she could see him. Working at sunset, he looked at the beauty of nature and dreamed quietly. If only Elrea also lived in this world. He smiled and confessed that he wanted to be near Evria. Hearing such an answer, Alicia did not stay and smiled. She promised to put him for this sentence. The guy thought it was too harsh. But Alicia replied, "Everyone can speak, but in reality, only actions and their consequences are." Alicia explained that she would agree to the engagement only on one condition. If together with Elria they both receive the title of magic in the same Academy of Magic. In addition, the Rhine should prove its dignity while studying at this academy. Hearing this, the guy asked how he could do it. Alicia smiled cunningly and asked why he just didn't apply power. She had high hopes for him, because even Elijah approved him. Alicia clicked her fingers and called Golian to approach her for a minute. The door dissolved instantly, and a man appeared on the doorstep. Golian asked if Alicia was calling him. The woman with a gesture ordered him to remain silent and go inside. When he approached her, Alicia said Golian that they wanted to check how capable the guy is, and after that he would decide whether he was worthy of joining the Magic Academy. Golian confidently and loudly replied that he could boldly rely on him. The Rhine smiled and said that then he would simply evade the strokes of Galian, and then put his blow in response. He asked if such a plan would work. He smiled cunningly and added that it is not necessary to complain if during his actions the building suddenly finds himself in ruins. They were in the new room, and the Rhine asked what the Elise's room was. The woman explained that it was a special hall for the training of magic organized by the state. Even those who do not have magic could test themselves in magical duels. She also added that Elrea was training here. Alicia said she would go and talk to Elrea. For goodbye, she asked Galian as it was necessary to check the Rhine's ability. The man agreed with pleasure. He then turned to the Rhine. He exclaimed that he had to enjoy this sparring. The guy wondered if there would be a Halion against if they were applying the same victory conditions that have agreed earlier. Galian gladly agreed and announced that the Rhine would win if he could avoid all his attacks over the next hour. He also emphasized that the Rhine is unlikely to be able to hit it once. The guy looked at Galian. In his thoughts, he was the one who took a place in the Keldwin family, and therefore had to be one of the best modern magicians. At this point, Galian smiled and said that if the Rhine was able to hit him at least once, he would allow him to call himself a dad. The Rhine bowed deeply and asked Galian instead, "Let me call you a test." They were already going to announce the duel, as suddenly at this moment Galen suddenly appeared over the Rhine and tried to hit him on his head. In an instant, he hit the earth with force, giving a sign to start. A powerful wave from the stroke of Galian was instantly rolled up with a room. The next moment, he noticed that no one was under his hand, and he did not injure anyone. He thought for a moment, and then said the Rhine that he reacted perfectly. At this time, the guy had already swung his foot to harm the enemy. Galen quickly changed his position and aimed a fist on the Rhine. He threw him through the room, but the Rhine cleverly evaded and was almost not injured. Galian rushed to him and urged to become more serious. He swung again, and when he saw it, the Rhine stopped for a moment, hesitating what to do next. At the moment when Galian's attack crashed into the wall, the Rhine jumped and made a salto, being behind Galian. The Rhine thought that if Eli trains here somewhere, then there should be a powerful magical protective sphere nearby. The man noted that Galian really impresses. The man turned and, with a smile with Elria, said he seems to be training with her. Then he added that there was no need to restrain. The Rhine bowed again and sincerely apologized. Then he straightened, smiled widely, and resolutely reported that it was time to act. His hand clapped his fist. At this time, Elrea sat in an empty room. Suddenly she heard a knock on the door, and her heart squeezed with fear. Alicia came into the room, carefully informing that it was only her. She sat side by side and said she wanted to talk to her daughter about something important. Elria screamed loudly, trying to understand what happened to the Rhine. Seeing such a reaction, Alicia was surprised, but she laughed immediately and reported that Gauliana was now being dealt with. Elria was a little surprised. In a few minutes, they were sitting on the couch for 2 minutes, and Alicia asked her daughters if she was really sure that she was talking about the same area they talked about earlier. Elria said with confidence that she recognized him, because he was the Rain she knew well. Alicia smiled and confessed that she never thought Elria could really find him. The girl also agreed and added that she was a little worried. Her face blushed instantly when she talked about it. Suddenly, hot tears rolled across her face, and she said that the Rain was really here. Alicia gently held her hand on her daughter's cheeks and asked quietly whether she guessed that Elria was feeling sympathy for him. At the same moment, a shadow flashed in the girl's eyes. She remembered Rein, with whom she fought 1,000 years ago. She smiled and confidently confessed that she liked. Suddenly, she tilted her head slightly and said that she probably liked it because she seemed so. Alicia was confused and wondered why every minute her confidence disappeared somewhere. Elria tried to answer in confusion. Swinging her gaze and falling into a blush, she quietly confessed that she had never felt anything like this before. When Elrea was on the verge of life and death, she came to aware. She really wanted to see the Rhine, the sincere warmth of his smile. If she had at least another chance to meet him, she would certainly take this opportunity right now. Elria smiled gently and confessed that this time she would probably finally say the Rhine that she likes. Alicia looked directly into her daughter's eyes and said that they thought with her equally. She also paid attention that she was talking about it in the past. They say, they once had a joint view of things. Elria immediately tensed and asked in surprise what it means. Alicia looked silently at her alarmed daughter. Elria was convinced that she did not hide anything from her past, either from her mother or others, but she still felt anxious. After a short, somewhat uncomfortable pause, Elria finally broke silence, explaining that all this was related to their common secret, hidden with the Rain. Alicia gently stroked her daughter on her head and agreed, they say. In this case, he would not ask many questions. Elria looked closely at her mother. After that, the girl lowered a little lower and smiled sincerely, thanking Alicia. Suddenly, Alicia glanced at her daughter and wondered if they had already talked about it. Alicia asked if Elray had already told him everything, and then reminded that this girl really loves him, so she wanted to spend his life with him. Hearing this, Elria had froze in place, as if she were growing up to the floor. After a small pause, she laughed and confessed that she never told him about it. Alicia only looked at her silently, put her hand on her head, and said quietly that she understands. Illyria is shy and difficult to pick up words, but she couldn't believe that she didn't even tell him about it. In response, Illyrium was defending herself, assuring that it was not true, and that Alicia did not even think about it. But later she realized that she really thought about it, and the first thing she thought was the word engagement. At that moment, Alicia remembered how the Rhine smiled sincerely and said he wanted to be near Elria. She clumsily admitted that not every young guy is able to say so in a similar situation. It is necessary to have a lot of bravery. Elria immediately asked her mom, which she had told her. Alicia smiled cunningly and said that Elria could not open these words. She advised the daughter to first confess to her feelings and then ask her question. Elria sighed. Alicia smiled cunningly and said that in this case, she was interested in finding out if she could recognize the Rain and allow Galliana to teach the guy. Suddenly, Aurea was clouding and asked what they were doing now. Alicia simply looked at her daughter and calmly said that to confirm their engagement, she instructed Galilei to experience the abilities of the boys. Elia said her mother, strictly, calling her by name. Alicia said in response that if Elria wanted to ask her to behave softer with that guy, then she would not even listen. However, Elria assured that it is not at all. The girl quietly said that the Rhine is not able to use magic, but despite this, he is very strong. And now their dad is in danger. Alicia looked at her daughter in surprise. At the same moment, the wall of their estate with a roar crumbled, and along with a powerful gust of wind, a male body flew inside. Alicia has frozen from surprise, as Elria breathed heavily, and Alicia's face became white, like chalk. Just in their eyes, in the wall of the estate gap, a huge hole. It was left by another, no less powerful blow. Alicia looked around, shocked by the ruins of her estate, and Elria decisively made a step forward and asked loudly if someone was alive. She looked out the window and saw that it was raining outside. The girl called him and said that now here, in this place. Seeing the rain, she heard the rain gently called her by name. The Rhine folded his palm with his mouth to hear better, and he asked Elria loudly if she saw Heliana, who flew somewhere here. Elria replied that he just appeared here literally a moment ago. The Rhine was genuinely surprised and asked if it was true, and then added, "It happened, even despite its restraint." Elrea lowered her gaze and was quietly asking what he did. The Rhine mentioned that he was told not to restrain himself in advance, so he carefully pushed him forward. Elrias only sighed and noted that then, She probably could handle it. Alicia instantly faded, hearing their conversation. Seeing her mother's horror on her face, Elrea turned to her. Alicia was protected by anxiety and, in a trembling voice, asked in Elrea what it was raining. The girl smiled gently and wondered if her mother found out how strong the Rhine was. She laughed and proudly added that the man she loves is the strongest of all. The month has passed since the rain destroyed the wing of the cauldrons. The restorative work was already in full swing. On that day, the Rhine was sitting on a low staircase near the library, holding a neat little book in his hands. He took a deep breath and noted that, as expected, there was no mention of the Alphine or his hero in this place. If it were a rural library, it would be clear. But even in such a respectable family as Baldwin, there were no records about them. It really surprised. At this point, Elrea came to the room. The girl informed the Rhine that he had received a letter. The guy went down, thinking whether the village had already learned about their engagement with Elrea. It was a letter from his mother. She asked if the Rhine was engaged to the daughter of the Baldwin family. Then she added that she understood everything, and remembered that joke. The mother wrote that she would not be fooled so easily, but decided to keep everything secret, then laugh at her father's reaction when he returned home. Elrea wondered what his mother was writing. The guy quickly grabbed the letter and joked that it was probably some funny letter. In addition, he said that the head of the village asked him to bring souvenirs from the capital. Elrea thought a little and wondered if the Rhine was in the royal capital earlier. The guy smiled embarrassed and admitted that Alicia patiently taught him the rules and manners of the Coldwell family patiently. This was undoubtedly related to the image caused by the destruction of the entire wing of the estate. Elrea was a little discorded, her cheeks were swollen, and she tried to say something hesitantly. The girl took herself with great effort, and then declared her companion loudly that it was time for them to take shopping. The young man was surprised to hear such an unexpected idea. Elrea turned away and her cheeks were blossomed. She said quietly that they needed to wear something for an exam at the academy. The Rhine just watched her for a few more seconds, and then remembered it, casting a look at their rural clothes. The guy looked at Elrea, smiled and said he agreed, because with this appearance he does not fit in the role of her fiancé. The girl turned away, secretly rejoicing what she had managed to make it, and now she will have a date with the Rhine. Subsequently, silence reigned in the estate. Alicia looked gently at her daughter and said with a smile what she was pretty. Then she added that she hopes that she and Rhine will spend a good time on her date. Elrea turned away and told others that she was going. At this time, the Rhine was already standing at the exit, preparing to go for purchases. Noticing Elrea, he immediately lifted his head and came to life. He blushed a little and hid his hand behind his back, and then said Elrea that he could already be moved. The girl strongly took him by her hand and smiled widely, supporting his every word. The streets of the city were surprisingly calm. Seeing her clothes on Rins, Elrea asked if she was really her father's things. The young man confirmed that yes, and explained that he lent them from Galleon for a short time. At that moment, the man happily agreed that using Dad's clothes is a great idea. The Rhine was slightly red and confessed that he was ashamed to ask such a request after all the troubles that caused it. He was very awkward and guilty. Aureus smiled and said that she was curious and unusual to see the rain on the other side, but today she wanted to find something that would be better for the rain. Hearing these words, the guy immediately turned red and hurried to cover his face with his hand. Quietly, barely audible, he agreed with Elrea. Subsequently, they went to the clothing store, where the boys took away the measures. They chose some beautiful suits that were well suited to rainy weather. It was warm outside, and many people enjoyed a great day near the fountain. At this point, the guy baked a piece of newly purchased burger. His face was immediately lightened by pleasure, and he could not but note what kind of delicious this burger. The Rhine noted that the dish on the estate of the Elrea family was incredibly tasty, although 100 years ago it was simply impossible to imagine. Elrea only nodded imperceptibly, continuing to chew food. After that, she loudly stated that it was enough to salt the fried meat and stale bread a little, and the dish would immediately become perfect. In response, the Rhine laughed and said that in this matter he fully understood it. Elrea smiled widely and confessed that she most liked the opportunity to have a calmly dinner with the Rhine. Suddenly the Rhine noticed something and, a little ashamed, pointed out to Elrea that there were crumbs of bread on her face. The girl was confused and began to look for what he was talking about. The Rhine came closer, gently pointed his finger, and quietly said that something was there. At that moment, Elrea has frozen, unable to move. The Rhine also froze in place, slightly discontinuing. His look involuntarily stopped on the gentle lips of Elrea. The girl was very red and called a boy named, returning him to her senses. It was at this moment that she remembered her mother's advice. First you need to confess to her feelings, and then ask about his attitude. At the same time, Elria jumped sharply and struck so much on the table that all the food and dishes flew around. Everything on the table fell, and they tried to understand what had happened. Elria wondered the boy if he was fine with him. Raim, lowering his eyes to the floor, quietly admitted that he was a little worried. At this point, many curious views were directed. Elria smiled condescendingly, and then confessed that there was one place she really wants to show. After a few hours on the road, they finally stopped at the edge of the fence. Elria smiled, extended her hand forward, and indicated that there is a magical academy of the kingdom of Vagelt, where entrance exams are waiting for them. The Rhine exclaimed with delight that this place seems just huge. Elri honestly confessed that she could get here for 12 years, but postponed the advice on the advice of Rain. The guy sighed quietly and thanked her for having found time to come. Elria added that the king also asked her to wait a little so that they did not work with the princess at the same time, and she received sweets as a reward. The Rhine laughed and said it was quite in her style. Suddenly, the girl confessed that she was strange to imagine how they will now learn together. The guy in response joked that this would only happen if he was successfully examining. Elria carefully inspected the terrain and asked if there was a man similar to the Rain in his native village. The man smiled and confessed that for him, because given his past life for more than 9 years, all surrounding children or even grandchildren, Elrea has almost dared to ask a more personal question. But here the Rhine suddenly interrupted her. He added that in addition to the first reason, he constantly thought of her. He smiled and noted that she was looking for him all this time. The girl was scattered. Her cheeks became blush. The boy's words clearly felt her. She looked at him just in the eye and said that he not only wanted to beat him, but also wants to spend time with him, just as today. She looked at him confidently and said that that is why she rejoiced that they had rehined earlier. Suddenly, she reached out to him, and she said that he should take care of her now. Elria felt a lot of excitement when she spoke these words. The Rhine smiled, raised his hand, and replied that the feelings are mutual. And then, a little jokingly, he added that he also needed her care. After these words, they took their hands. Many people gathered near the academy. The Rhine was enthusiastically told how many people came, and most of them came even from other countries to try their hand at the country's most prestigious exam. He asked if that's really the case. Everyone stood in full surprise without realizing what was happening. Then the Rhine turned to Elria sharply and asked her opinion. He turned to Elria, who kept his clothes firmly, and asked how much she would hide behind his back. The girl looked around and clumsily said that everyone was looking at her. She was clearly not on her own because of so much attention from so many different people. Despite this, she still did not let go of her hands. The girl confessed that she would continue to go behind the Rhine's back. In response, he complained that it was quite difficult to step for him. Elria looked at him closely and asked if she would be more comfortable to go if she climbed on his back. The guy in response wondered if she would not be uncomfortable. He somehow explained that, in fact, everyone was paying attention to her only because they considered her very sweet. Hearing this, the girl did not believe him at first, so she asked again that he had just said. Elria was a little discorded and asked the Rhine if he was thinking the same. The guy returned to her uncertainly and asked to ask what she said. Hearing her words, he turned away immediately. He also cheated, and then muttered that there was some difference that he thinks. Ellery clung to his clothes even more and confidently stated that it is very important to her, so let her say what she thinks. The Rhine closed his eyes embarrassed, but he still confessed. Of course, he also considers her sweet. Suddenly, the Rhine confidently extended his hands forward, thus bringing Elria to the forefront to notice it. The guy smiled and said that he was proud of this moment and wanted everyone to see him. Elrius again leaned against him and thanked him sincerely, promising to do everything possible to be proud of her. The guy turned the brush again and said that in that case, she could release his sleeve. But El Rey just followed his hand movement without removing. Suddenly, she grabbed him firmly and reminded that this is where the artery was passing, and he should not forget about it. The guy looked at her and asked, "Does she really want to die in the eyes of everything?" The Rhine approached the girl in glasses, apologized to her, and explained that they came here at the invitation of Baldwin's family. The girl asked if they were Elria and Rhine Frieden. Make sure they were really. She showed them the way and said they could go there now. They walked together along the corridor, and the girl admired that she could not even imagine that he could once walk next to Elria herself, a sage who was revived in a new life. She exclaimed enthusiastically that even in her dreams she did not dream of such. She looked at the Rhine and confessed that she did not know anything about it. It aroused her curiosity. She wanted to find out what he had to do with Keldwin's family. Elria looked out the window and smiled widely, announced that the rain was her fiancé. The young man just looked at her silently without saying a word. Hearing this answer, the girl smiled widely, remembering every word that just came. When the meaning of the word heard came to it, she asked loudly and very surprised what it means. She worried, but sincerely and excitedly congratulated them with this news. And then she asked, "Does this mean that the Rhine really has a noble origin?" The guy with a smile on his face assured that he was in fact an ordinary man, and advised her not to pay attention to it. The girl in delight exclaimed that it is simply impossible to leave unattended. Suddenly, the boys noticed a large shadow near them. A massive creature flew near them. One girl smiled widely and warned the boys to be careful. Someone is close to them. The giant winged creature flew in the sky rapidly, suddenly frozen in place, and just in front of her in the air, a powerful, deafening vowel explosion. The girl looked at the monster and said with a smile that it was Mr. Rufus Lilas from the Celios Federation. The Rhine turned and explained that this state is located on an irrigation system, and its inhabitants live in harmony with magical creatures. The girl agreed with this, and added that in this country, the main magic of the challenge, and the strength of the sorcerer, depends on what magical creatures he is able to conquer. At this point, Rufus Lilas flew on the back of the dragon. The girl said that although conflicts with other countries have long ended, their homeland remained an inexhaustible source of magic. In the Magical Academy, everyone could achieve significant results, so that is how they had to provide themselves with an advantage in relations with other countries. The Rhine thought for a moment, and then said that the main point was that the war was not directly but indirectly. The girl smiled and agreed, saying that the guy was right. The girl smiled and said that Mr. Rufus Lilas could easily control 4 dragons, a symbol of Celios, and she is known in all parts as a princess dragon. The Rhine looked into the sky, watching a girl and a dragon who flew together and courageously fought with an invisible enemy. His face was a smile, and sincere curiosity glowed in his eyes. He did not resist and said enthusiastically that it was simply incredible. Suddenly his gaze stopped on Ellie, whose face appeared a shadow of sadness. The girl, sadly lowering her eyes, pressed even harder to the Rhine, grabbing his hand even stronger than before. Suddenly she looked at him in the eye and annoyed with annoyance that, among other things, she also had the magic of calling. At the same moment she strongly pulled him by her hand. The Rhine smiled awkwardly and agreed with her. Elria looked at him and added with an insult that she possesses other types of magic. The conductor, all this time in silence, and awakened their small dispute from the outside. The guy smiled even wider, and after a short pause told her that the next time she surprised him. At that moment, he looked a little awkward. El Rio caught fire with this idea and agreed confidently, noting that he would be surprised even more than he can imagine now. The conductor girl smiled and stepped forward, after which she reported that this is where the exam was taking place for the boys. Hearing this, the Rhine and Ilaria simultaneously turned their heads to the other way. She showed the boys a small charming object and explained that they would have to destroy this design using magic, and they have a limited time. Elri looked silently at the subject without giving any emotion. Unexpectedly for everyone, she took a few steps forward and turned to the girl, asking if the exam was more difficult to pass. Hearing these words, the girl was very surprised and asked what El Rio was saying. The Rhine came closer, put her hand on her head and, a little worried, advised her not to put a poor employee in an uncomfortable position. El Rio looked at the boy quietly and said that it was really easy for her. A frightened employee grabbed a magical device and hurriedly started to press something, asking the boys to wait a little. Meanwhile, the guy was silently watching her, waiting for her actions. Within a few moments, the charming device began to change the shape rapidly, and eventually turned into a tiger. The magical energy, which became the beast, carefully caught everything around an experienced look. The Rhine looked closely at the creature and wondered if it was not a magical beast. El Real looked at the creature and explained that it was not him, but only a learning projection that simply imitates a true magical beast. The employee corrected the glasses and smiled awkwardly, and then explained that, as they guessed, they created this creature on the basis of samples that were previously brought to the academy. Elri confidently made a step forward and said what it means. She would have no problems with him. A light smile appeared on her face, after which she shouted at the Rhine, which stood nearby. The guy looked interested in Eller. She turned to him and smiled not to look away so that he did not miss anything. At the same moment, a magical staff suddenly appeared in her hand. She waved her weapon and announced that she had an opportunity to attack. At the same moment, many magical circles broke out in the air. The girl directed all her strength directly to the magical beast, and confidently said that this time the Rhine would see how she began to beat harder. The monster was terrifying on the girl and lifting sharp claws, but Eli had already used a powerful spell to give the enemy repel. At the same moment, The powerful flow of magical energy rapidly struck from heaven directly into the monster, threateningly roaring and breaking into his magical body. Elria looked back and smiled gently, asking the Rhine that he was thinking about what he just saw. Behind her back, everything was burning in the fire, and this sweet smile was amazingly shaded chaos that prevailed behind her. The employee was amazed at the heart of what she saw. She rolled down and slowly sank to the floor, faded and tried to say something, and the Rhine just smiled and noted that everything looks even brighter than he remembered. Elias smiled and confessed that she also took care of removing the protection and barrier from the target without changing the initial force of attack. The Rhine, without being surprised, patted her on his head and acknowledged that he had never seen such a powerful and costly combination. The frightened employee turned to the boys and asked in surprise how they could stay so calm when they saw. The Rhine, a little confused, explained that it is already a common matter for him. After that, he thought that 1,000 years ago people used magic, which was much more powerful than this. A panic worker exclaimed to Elria, which she just applied the magic of the 10th level, the most powerful spell of all. The girl asked if she was really so, and confessed that she had never seen before someone but the strongest magicians could use such magic. The Rhine apologized and asked the girl what grade he would receive if he succeeded in removing it all. The employee turned in confusion, not understanding what he was about. She turned and saw everything around the flames. The Rhine said that in the forest the fire spreads very quickly. The girl laughed nervously. The employee was excitedly explained that this fire was created by magic, and it can only be extinguished by a spell not lower than Miss Elria. Then the Rhine went forward, making it clear that he understood everything. He stretched his hands forward. The Rhine clenched his hands into his fists, bending his fingers. Looking at the bonfire, the guy confidently said that this is a sign. In the exam he would surely be lucky with a good grade. The Rhine then made a clear, accurate way forward. He moved quickly and cleverly. Stretching his hand forward, the Rhine dropped small electric discharges from his fist. It was fully concentrated on its purpose. At the same moment as he completed his attack, a whirlwind suddenly appeared. He twisted himself and began to sweep everything that happened to the boy on the way. He squeezed his hands and looked into the woods, which was burning on fire a few minutes ago, and now there was no trace left of the flames. Sigh, he said that he had coped with that. The remnants of his attack continued to rush forward, destroying everything that happened on the way. At that moment, his power faced a magical barrier that guarded this place. Although the barrier withstood the pressure, he was covered with cracks at the same time. Elria went closer to the boy and admired that he, as usual, was beating in glory. The Rhine stretched his hands and agreed, adding that it was indeed, but he had not yet taken the former form, because he had previously fought with 2 types of weapons and in armor. The guy leaned a little so that Elria could stroke him on his head. The girl gently patted him and said that he was very strong. Watching them, the worker turned in their side. Tears shone in her eyes when she held a small device. It was a sign that someone was calling her. The girl smiled hard and said that the organizer of the exam was calling them both. The boys went a little further into the castle. They stopped at the desk of a director, caught by various papers. The director turned to them and thought for a moment. The organizer of the royal exam in magic and weight, Eliza Landmel, stressed with their finger and stated that, according to the management, they were too strong for the academy. Eliza folded her hands on the table, leaned forward slightly, and first turned to Elria. She said she had already heard from the king about her unique talent, and added, "Today, Elria showed herself even better than expected." Hearing the words of Elisa, Elijah only nodded quietly, because everything she said was true. Then Eliza added that Ellie is very strong, but she worries that he could kill someone inadvertently. She also added that as long as Elria is here, she is only allowed to use magic to the 5th level, and if she violates this rule, she will be expelled immediately. Illyria lowered her head and said quietly that she understood everything. After that, Eliza got up and turned to the Rhine. In her eyes, she felt a neglect, and she wondered with the cold in her voice who he was. The guy put his hands behind his back, apologized to the organizer of the royal test, and then calmly replied that he did not quite understand what she asked. The girl confessed to him that he could not understand why he had not even realized his existence before. The guy thought for a moment, and then sincerely apologized to her for it. Eliza hit her head against the table and shouted loudly whether he really thinks that his stupid apology would help her. At this point, the Rhine turned to Elria and asked her to listen to him. He said he knew about the immortality of the elves, but does not understand whether it looks like Lisa was a peer of the previous Elria. The girl quietly explained that the elves cease to grow old at the age of 15 to 20 years, so to determine their exact age is very difficult. The Rhine wondered if the organizer stopped growing up before her aging stopped. Elrea thought for a moment and replied that it was sad. But that is the fate of elves. And then Eliza jumped and asked indignantly, or sometimes these fools did not call her little. Eliza restrained emotions, took a deep breath and asked the Rhine whether his actions were the result of magic. The guy agreed, recognizing that it was true, and added that he could not use magic at all. Eliza looked at him and asked what it means. The Rhine looked at her and said it was just a strong blow. Eliza struck the table with even more force and said loudly that she is not clear to her now how it turns out. She shouted with despair. She then raised her hand and asked if he could hold back this force within the academy. The Rhine thought a little and replied that it could not hit the full power, but that is where he had some difficulties. Eliza exclaimed that she also had problems. She explained that because of the Baldwin family, she had to put their assessments. The Rhine said he was ready to make some concessions if their marriage remains valid. Elrea agreed to this condition. Eliza sighed and confessed that Alicia had previously warned her of this opportunity, but she underestimated these people, so she was partially guilty of what had happened. She looked carefully at the Rhine and asked if she could hold herself in her hands outside the exams. In addition, the girl confessed that it is usually not mine to bend the stick sometimes, but not as much as it is today, because in this case she can be seriously angry. She sighed and added that she could not imagine that he would ever hear the names of Ilarius and the Rhine together. The guy lifted his head and wondered that she was referring to. The girl was awake and replied that only elves knew this legend. She proudly said she learned from her grandfather. After these words, Elrea was strongly red. She was killed and rushed to stop the organizer, and the Rhine, meanwhile, asked where the elves came from their names. Eliza smiled and explained that they were not their names, but the names of the heroes who lived 1,000 years ago. The elves came up with a legend that the sage said in his last moments of life. The Rhine approached and wondered that it was a legend. Eliza tensed and noted that he was looking smart, but it seems that she has not yet heard about it. The Rhine confessed that he wanted to hear this story from her. He hoped that she knew something so ancient that he could fall out of the opportunity to learn something new. Eliza told a legend about a hero who fell in love with a wise witch. The Rhine froze in place when hearing these words. The hero with a confused look tries to clarify. Did he fall in love with the sage? At this point, the girl behind him is rapidly blushing from embarrassment. The girl who gladly talked about it was genuinely confirmed. Yes, he really fell in love. The hero who was a man, and the elf, whom everyone knew as a sage, though stood on different sides of the barricades, actually wished each other only good. For half a century they competed, making their best to make their peoples at least losses in this war. But during one of these battles, the sage became ill and died soon. Upon learning of this, the hero decided to penetrate the castle of King Vegelt on his own. The hero stood on the verge of life and death through his wounds. But what made him come here at all? He said he came to say goodbye to the sage. The girl who told this story considered it very cool. What else, has not love made him go through all these trials? She was firmly convinced of it, and it was difficult to convince her in the opposite. She believed, if a wise woman heard the words of the hero, she would be happy. With each of his sentences, the heroine's cheek was increasingly poured by a blush. Elves have many legends related to this story. The girl wanted to tell even more. She was so captured by the process. However, the guy stopped her with a gesture, raising her hand. He thanked the dear organizer for sharing this knowledge with them. But Elrea looked sick, so he wanted to take it from here as soon as possible. He looked back and saw a girl who trembled sitting on the floor. Only after his words did the organizer finally pay attention to it and asked the girl if she was fine with her. She suddenly jumped, assured that she should not worry, and asked not to worry. The organizer once again reminded her that she would restrain and did not use force. Approaching the exit, the guy kept the girl carefully, helping her to reach the door confidently. It was at this point that the organizer turned to them loudly, and the couple turned to her direction. The woman sincerely congratulated them on the successful passing of the entrance exam at the Echo Magic Academy. After leaving the office, they stopped right at the door and did not move on. The Rhine decided that this story was not so bad. The girl, on the contrary, looked nervous. Her behavior was quite clear, because this story was passed on to generation by generation. But before she has realized it, they have already fallen in love with each other. It stunned her. She wept again, closing her face with palms. She did not tell him this story because she knew she would not like it. Slowly took her hands away and lowered her eyes. In fact, something was much worried about her. He looked at her carefully, waiting for her to say next. It turned out that she considers her mistake to tell him everything from the beginning. Finally, she returns to him, and her whole face blushes, and tears appear in her eyes. The guy wandered, reached out to his hair and began to scratch the nape. He thought what words to pick up to answer the girl. In the end, despite her eyes turning away, he said quietly that she was not mistaken. It is only an old legend of elves. She really wanted to know if he really appeared near her in her death. The young man simply and confidently confirmed it, nodding quietly. The girl was noticeably moved, because despite wounds and loneliness, he still came to her. It truly impressed her. He did not intend to kill little Tian for the sake of this meeting, so he would have appeared on her way. The girl was overwhelmed by the curiosity, and she did not restrain her, exclaimed, asking what he told her for the last time when he saw. The guy immediately opened his eyes with surprise. He remembered that they never found out who of them was stronger. But those 50 years of friendship and competition with her became true for him. It was these thoughts that raged in his head when he, wounded, sat in front of her grave. In his memoirs, he again saw a young elf, who did not look at her years, lying among beautiful fresh flowers. He tried to pick up words to describe what happened then. He finally opened his mouth to utter these words near the grave, but he decided to answer otherwise. He lied to the girl, saying that he did not say anything then. It surprised her very much. He exclaimed that he could open his mouth like a fish. Now he became awkward himself. But she shouted in response that she did not believe that someone would imitate the fish before death. Her cheeks flashed red, and together they looked rather senseless. She realized that he had deceived her, and began to ask what he really said, repeating the same thing once after. But the guy just turned around and, without saying a word, went away. He said it was time to go. They had to inform Alicia that they passed the exams. The girl rushed after him, calling the hero loudly. It has passed for a while, and many people gathered together in the estate, both servants and family members. Everyone joyfully launched fireworks, greeting the heroes on the fact that they successfully passed the exams at the Magical Academy. The girl thanked her mother and dad for having arranged such a holiday for them and greeted sincerely, and the Rhine expressed gratitude to his relatives for such a wonderful gift. The woman approached the young man, put her hand on her shoulder and reported that they would soon move to the Academy's hostel. She also said that taking care of Elria now entrusts him. The guy did not quite understand what responsibility she means. Elrea was shy, silent, and not too polite. Other worries did not rest her. It seemed that she could not always spend enough time. At that moment, the young man called distance, and he looked around. A woman who was holding her hands near her face was standing next. With tears in the eyes of the girl's father admitted that he did not want to ask for it, but still asked, to help Elria in the academy. Elria felt not in her plate among strangers, and for her to visit the academy, a real test. The Rhine looked at the woman and then pointed his finger on the man as if asking what had happened to him. The woman just sighed, because she was her husband, who surprisingly remained sober, and now he remained to hear the most important thing he wanted to say. The guy and wife of the husband listened silently, holding his breath, and waited for his next words. Moreover, he poked his finger and stated loudly that he would not even touch his daughter before the wedding. Their faces were filled with surprise and condemnation, but they only silently looked at the man and his strange behavior. The Rhine replied that, of course, he would do it, and said he understood him as a father. The man was no longer screaming, but tears were still flowing on his cheeks. He understands everything perfectly, because they are punished by death, and it is also. He seems to have been sure that a man would just kill him because of it. He said it with such seriousness that you start to understand for a moment. It is not a joke at all. She came to her daughter and said that she would have to make a lot of efforts to fix everything. And in the background, the father did not get tired of repeating how he was glad that the guy understood everything correctly. Subsequently, young people, together with their hands, headed with other students to the entry ceremony. Speaking from the podium, the organizer congratulated everyone on the Journal of the Magical Academy. From now on, they became one community, studying under one roof, and she sincerely hoped that everyone would make every effort to reach their dreams. The couple quietly sat in the hall, listening carefully to the guidelines and greetings from the Academy's leadership. The Academy dormitory was a real decoration. A 4-story building with a well-groomed facade made a pleasant impression. The youth got the key to their common room. It was then that the guy, holding a metal object in his hand, frozen in place. The girl, seeing it, could not hide her astonishment and froze. The Rhine decided to contact the administration to find out if the boy and the girl were allowed to live together in the same room. The woman explained that for couples from the noble family it was allowed during the settlement. If there were no special obstacles, they were tried to provide a common room. They have a separate room for engaged. He asked Elria if she would agree to live that way. The girl immediately agreed, having nothing against such a life. She embarrassed to her face with her bag and quietly confessed that she would be quiet to live with him, feeling safe than living with some outsiders. He liked it, because Alicia himself asked him to take care of her. The girl, a little angry, jumped her eyebrows. She was not so independent that someone would do something like her. When they entered the room, they were really amazed. The young man could not even hide his feelings. Everything around shone with cleanliness, and exquisite furniture immediately fell into the eye. It was evident that it cost a lot. The girl was also surprised, noting that the room was really wonderful. They entered inside, catches and bags even further. The girl opened the refrigerator and looked intently inside. Turning to the guy, she explained that if you accumulate magic power in advance, he will also be available to use magical objects. The guy, removing the jacket, said that the ceremony was already over, so you can cook something because he just gets fictional. The girl was genuinely surprised and asked if she was able to cook at all. He took a little food from the refrigerator and replied that it could cook simple dishes, the same as those who were once cooked during the survival in the wild. For the girl, it was a real nostalgia. She even rejoiced in these memories a little. She told how in those days she had a rabbit in the battlefield. She was sure to hunt him. The guy looked at her and asked in surprise if she really did it. She remembered the day we were sitting on the trees and she was eating apples. Then she just joined the army and felt like a reserve magician. She was allowed to eat only fruits and plants. The guy also mentioned that if he wanted to boil the water, the enemies would quickly notice him through the steam pillar. So instead of water, he quenched his thirst for a juice squeezed from the fruit of Badu or something like that. The girl realized what it was about. Although she liked the taste of juice, she polluted her clothes every time. She cheerfully remembered it from the past and laughed. The guy noted that the shape of Woggle was also white. Altan's had black clothes, so the stains from the juice on it were almost invisible. But one day the girl felt his smell and, focusing only on him, found a place where he was. In memory of this, she laughed. This moment she crashed well into memory. Then the wind blows directly on her, which is why she managed to recognize his smell among many others. After washing the tomato, she smiled and said that once they finally again, today they will have a simple food for lunch, just as they used to be in their best times. The guy wondered if she would eat it right now. Elria, collecting her hair in a tail, said that given her nostalgia, the dish could hardly be called bad, and she added that he could help him with cooking. They undertook to cook together. The guy skillfully threw all the ingredients on the pan, skillfully mixing them in the air, and the girl, meanwhile, cut the vegetables on the board. She remembered that she had never prepared with someone since childhood. Therefore, this moment promised to become especially pleasant for her. But the guy never understood whether she was in mind his past life of the LN, or is it present. She remembered the past when her mother praised her several times, but since then she has not heard good words. Suddenly, the guy walked behind and gently put her hand on her head, as if he wanted to reassure her. In his opinion, the best praise is when legends are made even because of many generations. The guy is sure that if her mother found out about it, she would be proud of her daughter. Hearing this, the girl looked around in surprise and opened her eyes wide. His words moved her deeply. Tears came to her eyes, but she hurried to wipe them quickly from the cheeks. The guy did not let go, gently holding her head, so he wanted to help her calm down and show that he was nearby. When they already settled at the table, the girl suddenly asked Rein who he was in his past life. He was surprised for a moment, and then replied that he remembered only one thing. Then he felt very lonely, and the memories were broken. In that life, he was born a very weak child. He was often tormented by fever, so he spent most of his time in bed, and for his parents he was only a burden. In the Altan Empire, where he was born, there was a big difference between the rich and the poor. State policy was to deplete the common people, forcing them to work to expand territories, even with limited resources. Most children from poor villages joined military service, but he could not become a soldier, so he became disappointed for his family. He still remembers how he stood in the door and watched his mother upset the last money left in the family. He was very sad because of that, and he decided to become stronger. When the temperature dropped, he went out to train, and when he returned, he went to do again. This was repeated once after together, and he did not even notice how he changed himself. He was happy. Now he was not just compared to others. He became stronger than each of them. Finally, he was recognized as he was talked about, but a big shadow came with the victory. Everyone whispered that the Rhine is not a man, but a real demon from hell. His mother, who was laughing for giving birth to a demon, also began to look at her son as a real freak. She made fun of the baby, who had already rubbed. He was soon given a detachment of mercenaries. At first, Even the mercenaries looked at him with a look at him. But later in their eyes, sympathy changed to fear. But no matter how dangerous the battle is, he always dealt with enemies with special cruelty and returned alive every time. In the end, no one dared to approach him. He continued to work as a mercenary, looking for the same as himself, but did not find anyone. However, with each new achievement on the battlefield, his glory grew until people finally called him a hero. You never know what your life has prepared for you. Despite all the difficulties he experienced earlier, talking about it, he smiled a little. And suddenly women's hands gently touched his face. Elria praised the Rhine, noting what he was wonderful. She thought he was a real fellow if he could survive it all. Her words forced him to blush, and he looked at her without a look. When the girl removed his palm from his cheeks, the guy asked in surprise why she suddenly did so. She barely smiled and explained that she just wanted to praise him in response to his kind words. She really liked when she was praised. He was himself, so he probably did not realize it. Now that she is nearby, he's no longer alone. If he makes an effort, she will continue to be admired. In addition, if you remember her past life, she was much older than him. He could be his eldest sister rather than someone else. However, one day he just laughed. He seemed funny and at the same time very sweet. Tears sparkled in his eyes. Covering one eye and not removing his smiles from her face, he thanked her, jokingly calling, as she asked with her older sister. Hearing such words in her address, the girl became embarrassed and began to tremble. She rushed to fascinating the boy's head vigorously, completely unbuttoning his hair. The guy immediately realized that something went wrong and hastily promised to do so. It was already 9 in the evening when the guy went to another room and immediately realized that it was a bedroom. The girl who came after him looked at the Rhine, which was frozen in place, and wondered what had happened. It turned out that the whole problem was that there was only one bed. The guy noted that the place here would be enough for 2. It was curious. I carefully asked her if she would not be against if they were sleeping on one bed. The girl blushed with embarrassment and exclaimed loudly that, of course, she would have had nothing. She tried to hide her surprise and embarrassment, asked him if he did not mind, although a slight stuttering gave her true feelings. The guy answered quickly and simply, "He is indifferent." It surprised the girl. The young man justified that he slept like a log. She, tapping her fingers, turned her head and said that she rushed in bed all night, but whether it was really unknown. Sometimes she was so tired that she just fell asleep. But the guy did not quite understand what to nap. He only suggested that if it is uncomfortable, he can spend the night in the hallway. The girl immediately grabbed him by the jacket sleeve without letting him go. The guy turned in surprise and noticed how she was embarrassed. She confessed that she was alone. The girl asked to stay with her. But of course, if he does not mind, she was already burning with shame saying these words. But turning away, he said he would never be against it. The girl was so surprised that she was lost. Already finally turning away, he realized that the thoughts of her father's facial expression would not leave him even before bedtime. Early in the morning, he rang the alarm clock. The guy, not yet having time to wake up, yawned and asked himself in surprise whether the morning had been really. He realized that he was a little uncomfortable, and turning his head sideways, saw that the girl had fallen asleep using one of his hands instead of a pillow, and put her palm on top. The girl slept calmly, not paying any attention to either the alarm clock or to the guy who was near her. She began to spin in her sleep, and it was very worried about the guy. After a while, he even tried to move her away. Turning, he suddenly realized that he was glad that he was already an adult. The guy began to get up, calling a girl who did not allow him to stand up. Ryan said she had to wake up in the morning in time. She screamed that she did not want to wake up, shook her head from side to side, trying to cause pity. The guy shouted in response, showing her finger to the side of her to go to the bathroom. "If you conquer, it will come to your senses faster." Sitting on the edge of the bed, she slowly rubbed the sleepy eyes and said she wanted to wash. The guy sighed lightly. She, of course, could go to wash first, and in the meantime he will prepare breakfast for them while she is in the bathroom. The girl began to mutter something indiscriminately, and the guy did not feel her words, so he decided to ask. It turned out that the sleepy girl suggested that he wash together. The guy was blurred and replied that it was impossible. Hearing the refusal, the girl immediately resorted to, clearly going to sleep. Then the guy surrendered, agreed to go there, only asked her not to fall asleep again. After a while, he filled the bath with water and it was ready. He checked the water temperature with his own hand, made sure that all was well, and asked her well-being. After that, he offered her to get into the bathroom. The girl came inside, holding a towel in her hands, and a rubber duck sat on it. She looked carefully at the toy and asked what she needed. At that moment, the guy realized that the girl had not yet come to her senses and seems to be awake yet. Having released one hand, she squeezed his t-shirt firmly. Then he carefully asked what happened to her. The girl reminded him that they needed to go to the restroom together. The guy immediately denied and declined strongly, saying that he could not do it. The girl was immediately offended. She reminded him that he promised to go with her. Squeezing his teeth, the guy realized that if he went on, they would definitely be late. He sighed heavily, realizing that he had no other way out. He suggested another option. The rain would hold her hand until it climbs inside, so he asked her to finally give him peace. The girl agreed to this condition and began to shoot her pajamas. The guy shouted to her to stop and no longer did it. However, she did not pay attention to his words, as if she had not heard him. She looked at the boy and asked what happened to his face. It turned out that he managed to wrap his face with a towel, which the girl just reached out to him. The guy said he always closes his face when he takes a bath. This is already a habit. The girl was surprised and replied that she did not understand why to do it, because this way you won't see anything. Do not depreciate the hero. He is able to quickly understand what is happening around. Elri was enthusiastically clapped in her palm without hiding the delight. For her, this guy was a real miracle. The young man reached out to her, inviting him finally to take his palm and get into the bathroom. The girl calmed down a little and went into the bathroom. She was still holding the guy firmly by sitting in warm water. The girl was very warm and cozy in the water. After all, when you lie in the bath, hot water warmed the body quickly. However, she was not talking about it at all. She meant that the warmth goes from the fact that their palms were intertwined. The guy just agreed in silence and stayed side by side. It is time for lessons, and they approached the academy for 2. The girl looked at the Rhine in surprise and asked why he was so exhausted. He himself could not decide whether it is good or bad that she didn't remember anything. So he just waved his hand and said that all this was the little things. They went to class. Many students immediately paid their attention to Alorius, who, feeling the increase in curiosity with themselves, was a little squeezed. Many people immediately ran to her. Everyone was waiting for her. Some have heard that in the entrance exam she used the 10th level. Therefore everyone believed that she was truly worthy to be called the successor of the sage. Watching this side, the guy felt that all this had happened to him before. The girl in front of him was confused with sudden attention and did not know how to handle it. She suddenly thought, "What? How to grab a guy standing behind and put him forward, they say. She is a little thing next to him because he is much steeper than any Rhine." The guy immediately realized that he had decided to substitute. Many people watched it. At the same moment, they ran to the guy, shouting that he was able to stop the spell of the 10th level, which Elri imposed. Apparently, he had some connections with her family if he could safely be with this girl. He sighed quietly and said calmly that, above all, he was very impressed and grateful for all the words he heard. He introduced himself as Rhine Frieden. One day he intended to accept the name of the Cold Wind clan. Unlike all those present, the Rhine was an ordinary man from the common people. I don't even know anything about him, but their hobbies were sincere. He sincerely became interested in each of them. Of course, they accepted its strength. After all, as the sage appreciates, even if she is an elfish, as well as everyone who teaches magic should be treated with patience and respect. Suddenly, someone from behind was quietly said, "They say, it is hard to believe that an ordinary guy like him will really be able to accomplish this task. So what is the fact that an ordinary person can cancel the 10th level? He is not so naive to believe in such. There is nothing extraordinary or cool for him." The Rhine stated, "If someone is really strong, then he will definitely find something to criticize." He was a descendant of the Farhag family of the Verminund. The Rhine remembered how he talked to Miss Keldwin, and she told him that the kind of Verminin, as well as their, had ancient roots. The son of the present generation, the Fere, has a great talent and has a huge stock of magic. If not existed by Alesia, all the attention would be obtained by him. He always puts himself in the first place and accuses everything of others. In her opinion, he is a real nothing. Born in a respected family, she feels only shame because of such behavior, but still, if possible, asks him to change her character. Hearing all this, he never understood what the fault of this person. Now Fareg shouted that for the Baldwin family, which for centuries defended the invoice, it was a real insult to having any connection with such a common man as he was. The Rhine continued to speak calmly, unlike his opponent who shouted. He explained that if he is in doubt, it is easy to check. Just ask about it in Alicia. Peheg struck the hero with his palm and said with indignation that such a common man like him was not a place in the academy. This is a real nonsense. But the hero was able to pass both written and practical exams, and also received the approval of the director himself. Concerning school policy on magic, whoever you are, everyone is obliged to study the magic left by the sage, Ferg shouted angrily so that he would not treat them as if on his grandchildren, and did not confuse them with his children with his condescending tone. Other students began to reassure Ega, convincing him to stop. They emphasized that it is not necessary to tease a person related to the Coldwell family, as it can create problems for the Vinden family. He became funny from the words of connection with him. In his view, the Rhine was a regular servant, so he did not give any weight of his words. At that moment, the Rhine apologized for a late representation. Going closer to Elria, he gently hugged her for his waist and whispered quietly, "I am your bridegroom." The girl immediately blushed and looked in his eyes. Everyone around opened their mouths with surprise without believing their own eyes. The girls blushed with shame, and the boys froze in surprise, because they realized that she had already got it. Going closer to the girl, he whispered quietly in her ear that they need to return to their places. She was vigorously in response, showing that she was quite agreed. The guy took her hand and led her to the stairs to climb his seats. He bit his fist and trembled with laughter, barely resting, not to laugh out loud. Not hiding his joy, he smiled and said that he was very pleased to see her confused face. The girl did not see him a long time ago, and had time to forget about all his former pranks. The guy advised her not to call him bad now. Excessive boldness of people can lead to the death of allies, and it must understand it. Isn't it better to offend them now than when it's too late? The girl gradually begins to understand why the soldiers of her country were so humble. At this point, one of the students addresses them and offers, "If they are looking for a place, why not join and sit next to it?" It was a young guy in glasses. He sat alone and confessed that there was no one here, so he was sad and boring. "Thank you." The hero introduced himself and suggested that he call him how convenient it would be. The guy nodded in response and called himself. His name was Vicel Blanche, and he was glad to meet the Rhine. The girl remembered the name of Blanche. She probably heard about him before. The guy said that in his family everyone is engaged in the engineering of magical equipment. Even the charming symbols used by Miss Keldwin, including her staff, made his sister. The girl worshipped and persistently asked her sister that she was using this rod very carefully. The guy smiled. He was convinced that his sister would please these words. After all, when she first received this order, she literally bounced with happiness. The girl, as he was ashamed, suggested that he turn to her by his name. However, the guy decided that he would call her Miss Elria. She is surprised why Vizel decided to take an exam on the magician, although there are separate classes for magical engineers. The guy, adjusting his glasses on the bridge, replies that he is more practitioners than the theorist. In addition to the fact that he is a sorcerer, first of all he wants to know himself and the world around. It is this desire to drive it to a true goal, to create a magical tool that will not just be a miracle, but will become really useful in life. For someone, he might seem annoying, but the Rhine is not worried at all. He believes that his desire to create a good magical subject fully corresponds to the idea of the school, to study and develop magic. The complaining guys just do not understand it. The girl nodded, agreeing. It is important to study in detail and carefully. When they both talked about it, the guy seemed really important. By the way, he learned that this guy was able to cancel the magic of the 10th level, so he wondered if he could look at his magic artifact. The girl pointed to him and said that the magical forces of the Rhine were a little unusual. His manipula works incorrectly, so he cannot use magical things. Then please suggested the guy experiment. The guy could try to destroy his subject. To do this, he got a small instance. The guy, while shocked, admitted that he could not break this thing. But classmates have just waved, they say. It is just a spare thing. But as an engineer magician, he was too interested. He was courting to find out under what conditions the magical object could break, and he could no longer resist the experiments. He created this magical artifact on his own. He allowed different people to test it. The strength of the thing withstand both heavy loads and reusable use, but the Rhine was to hear about it as he broke the staff with one hand. Seeing this, Weisel's face changed instantly. The tension appeared in its entirety. The couple immediately noticed that a crack appeared on his glasses. With a trembling in his voice, Weisel wondered if the Rhine was aware that it was one of his best works. However, he immediately denied himself, saying, "Did he not order to break everything?" It turned out that Blanche did not even suspect that he would break this thing so simple. The Rhine reached out a broken object to a boy who trembling, and he began to look carefully. He asked Elria, as a person who is well versed in magic, that she thinks of this strange phenomenon. In general, Elia believed that the magic of the Rhine was different from everyone else. She was wondering what Vaisel would say about it. However, Vaisel himself did not have a certain answer. He agreed to what he heard is true, because the protective spell and engraving were really damaged. In his opinion, all this was closely related to the fact that the magic artifact itself was also broken physically. He needs to watch a little more and figure out how it breaks down. He still cannot say at least something certain. And about the conclusions, you cannot dream. It can be said that it is still a real mystery for him. He looked carefully at the guy, wondering how such a magical power managed to gain. On this guy just indifferently shrugged. Who knows the answer to this? It was so long ago that all the details were already erased. Turning his head to the side, he thought why someone was listening to their conversation. Under the table was a girl who, frightened, began to rise sharply and hurt her head against the table. She rushed to the floor with pain, pressing her hand to the damaged place. She made herself screaming with pain. The table was extremely solid. Raising her head, she saw that she was looking at 3 vigilant eyes. The girl kept her breath nervously. She tried to convince everyone that he was not a stranger. The Rhine pointed to her and turned to others, hinting to call the guard. The girl begged to wait, sincerely apologizing and assuring what the truth was saying. It was Millis Lambus, a 17-year-old girl from the outskirts of Noaberg. All her childhood went among the sheep. They were her only friends. But now, having received a scholarship and arriving in this new place, Millis was more and more thoughtful. She can find real friends among people here? Watching a strange girl, he said that Elria himself would understand the situation. She noticed that the girl was full of energy, and she liked it, so she received approval. The Rhine increased its status in its head from a suspicious person to a classmate. Millie screamed with joy. She thought about the performance all night and sincerely appreciated such attention. The Rhine wondered in Millis why she eavesdropped their conversation. The girl confessed that the whole herd conversation was too complicated for her, and now she just wanted to find someone I could talk to. The guy suggested the usual way, just approach people. The girl looked at him in surprise and asked if she heard it correctly. It is impossible for her. She can't just say, "Yesterday was a great party," or ask how this year's harvest is going. He should understand it. How is an ordinary girl like her to find common ground with such people? The guy hinted to her that one could just say, "There was so much sheep this year that I even broke the scissors or something." Everyone would have laughed. She shouted annoyedly so that he did not invent or pretend that it does not apply to it. She heard that the Rhine was also born in the outskirts. The guy noted that his native place was not as distant as she had, so it had to be clear. They argued further. She shouted, asking where he came from. He replied that Arisa. It turned out that it also from there, where there are only forests, mountains, and rivers around. But in Noaberg there were only the mountains themselves. Until they could stop their disputes, we called Elria again and again. She has her own peculiarities at home, crystal clear water and large flocks of sheep. Does the Rhine not know that the best wood grows in her village, and there are oranges growing whole plantations? And recently, local residents have found a new kind of squirrel. The girl has already started to tremble. She gradually seemed and did not know what to give an example, except for those who mentioned. Only sheep floated in the head, but he immediately recalled that she had already talked about them. She rushed to the boy, shouting that she may have only good water and sheep. But if she goes and then, she will remain alone. At least she needs one of the countrymen nearby. Having reacted, Elria closed the boy, standing in front of him, and it was at that moment that the girl fell directly into her arms. Keldwin said Millis that she would be pleased to become her friend. Millis moved to the depths of her soul, could not believe her ears, and even burst into tears with happiness. I asked her if she liked this girl. From this, the girl burst into tears even more. She began to press all her hands and say that she was very moved by such an act. I had a comparison. This girl was very similar to a little puppy. The ferret also decided to introduce himself and added that he was glad to get acquainted with her. He assured that no formalities should not be followed next to him. Ryan breathed a sigh of relief and, smiling, agreed that they could communicate like ordinary peasants. The girl, squeezing his fists, first whispered something under her nose, and then gathered with his forces and exclaimed to the whole hall. She now has 3 people's friends. For the first time, she could finally name true human names among all her friends. While the Rhine was working hard, she cast her gaze on the door and noticed that the teacher had not yet appeared. The lesson had to begin, but the teacher was late. Ursel noted that, oddly enough, the lesson began for a long time. Perhaps there was some unforeseen situation? Miles suggested that she may have just got lost in the way. But it was almost impossible to get to the right office, even if she found it. Outraged, she asked if he could stop treating her, as if she had not understood anything. In response, she was assured, there is nothing to worry, because she is a smart girl. In a moment, the door of the class pulled out of the loops, and at the same time pieces of concrete, flying on all sides, scattered around the room. The class and a knight in armor came to the class. She noted that she had barely managed and joked that Eliza would be angry because of her late. The young teacher congratulated everyone and informed that she was their class leader, and she is very pleased to get acquainted with them. The children silently watched as a girl who destroyed the wall looked at them motionlessly. Finally, someone recognized in her a special magus of the highest rank, the Dawn Canos, and the girl did not deny it. Special magicians are able to use the magic of the 10th level, and this girl gained such a rank because she won the giant, devastating monster of the highest class. Everyone wondered why their class teacher was a legendary special rank teacher. Last weekend, the king himself gave a direct order to Almi, though. She participated in a major operation to capture the dragon's nest. The same girl asked everyone not to vote. One of the students raised his hand and asked Alum that with the orders of the king. The girl only smiled and said that she had recently fulfilled them. The weight of the weight and the director of the academy asked her to become a teacher. She studied in these walls, so he knows well how everything is arranged here. In her soul, she hopes that students are at least a little happy to see her as a mentor. So now she will quickly tell them what awaits them during her studies. The school has 8 first classes, and in each study for 40 students. The teacher drew on a chalkboard so that all children could look better. During the year, students will be evaluated both separately and the whole class, and at the end will calculate the average score. If the student's assessment is higher than the average, he will be able to finish his studies. It is most affected by the success of the evaluation of the whole class, even if someone takes the highest personal score. But if their class fails, he will not be able to become a magician. It is important for future magicians to remember that their duty is not only to think about their own success, but also to be able to work with others, putting the interests of the group in the first place. She pointed to Mill, calling her a fluffy girl, and asked to explain what was the duty of the magician. Lambert was very surprised that she was called for this reason, and she even began the icon. She began to tell how magic was investigating crimes. The magician is also obliged to win dangerous animals, and the monster is his duty. Alma nodded her head, agreeing. Yes, it is the correct answer. But that's not all. To organize the evacuation of locals, to provide a safe path, to isolate the dangerous area and to carry out rescue work, a lot of effort is required. For such preparation, the team should consist of several people, and sometimes even more participants. It is a common responsibility for the whole class. Egg hopes that there will be no one who will pull back others. Everyone will evaluate every month. It will consist of a real duel and test in the form of a test. It is there that they will check how students respond to different situations. During the year, the class evaluation will take place 4 times. In addition, they are waiting for a large-scale exam, during which they will have to compete with others. Opening the tutorial, she saw that she should read the lectures on magical theory, talk about monsters, their habits, features, and basic abilities. She had to share with the students everyone she knows. Closing the book, she decided to bypass all these details. They say, it is better to go to practice immediately. So she rejected the book aside. She got a little bell and called it lightly. Suddenly, all children from their class transferred to a small lawn. It was here that their training duel was to take place. Milus was frightened by El Rhea, asking where they got. Vizel immediately realized that they are in a space created with a magic artifact. It was really interesting. The Rhine noted that both the wind and the grass were quite real. The teacher lifted staff and said that this magical subject was created by the director himself. She explained that until the action of the staff is abolished, no one will be able to leave this place, and all attempts to intervene from the outside in their match is in vain. The girl asked if someone wanted to fight her, warning that she would rest her true strength and would not fight the full. The students realized that to fight with those who had a special rank, it was pure madness. She hurriedly urged them to act quickly. If no one will vote, everyone will die. In response, Farrig was the first to say that he would then become her rival. He introduced her name and added that he had the 7th level of magic. From childhood, he has trained for magical duels. Hearing this, the girl smiled and said that it sounds very promising. In this case, it will become more serious. The guy was immediately frightened. He did not expect such and decided to clarify how to understand that she would start to take seriously. So he asked to explain it more specifically. Smiling, the girl with the gestures on her fingers showed that he may be able to break him several bones, although she was not quite sure of it. Verman was immediately frightened and retreated back, and his friend stood in front of him, closing from the teacher. He was definitely not going to put up with it. Did she really want to break his bones and call it self-control? Suddenly, the hand rose to the side. It was Illyria, who stated that she also wanted to try. Alma thought that this girl seems really brave, not that the guy. The teacher wondered how her name is. Elria introduced to her. There was no drop of fear on her face. 3 friends were behind. They watched it quietly. The teacher confessed that she was the unusual child she told Eliza. She has already heard that she was only allowed to use spells to the 5th level, so she decided to meet her. But the girl just smiled and assured that everything was fine with her, so you should not restrain herself. Hearing this, the teacher shuddered in surprise. However, the most important thing, she asked the girl to ask if she should continue to restrain. These words were angered by the wizard, which at the same moment released a powerful stream of magic, which touched several students. However, Elria was able to stop this attack without much effort. Alma was amazed at how easily she managed to defend herself. Melassa and Vissel, who stood behind her, was quite surprised, but the hero had already seen a similar one earlier. The teacher, using magic, created a giant human hand from the bones and directed it to a student, but she was also able to repel this attack. Unlike ordinary attacks, this magic barrier dissipates any magic energy, and thus protects even magic attacks. The teacher was delighted that my spell was truly sophisticated. I wondered if she had some tricks in stock. Alma sounded in response, and said that he could use anything. The main thing is that everything was in a real battle. She wanted to find out how many bones could break. Her face remained unmoved. The Rhine called to his classmates to pay attention to him. He called those who could still move and asked them to help pick up the wounded, and those who were faint or could not go on their own. He also warned, if you approach too close to the battlefield, you can suffer seriously. The Rhine decided to stay still because it increasingly covered curiosity, so he asked what would be with the other two. The Wine also wanted to stay and watch, and Miles stood, trembling with the whole body, and could not move a step. The giant hand reached Keldwin once after, but she confidently reflected her stream. Then it caused a tree from which the roots began to crawl, heading to the teacher. She was a little bit when she was asked what magic she owned. How is her simple, weak magic can be compared to the powerful spells of strong magicians? Vissel noted that it is not easy to become a mentor of the law, but Elrias' magic allows her to create dozens at the same time. Although it only uses simple spells, its strength is enough to resist even the strongest spell that seems impossible. The Rhina explained that she does not use spells directly. Instead, she uses one spell to impose others. That's what her feature. Its magic reserve allows you to use about 1,000 simple. My landlord was very surprised by this figure. Then it turned out that the huge amount of mana, which Wetzel fixed with the help of magical artifact, was the total power of all the imposed ones. It uses many shaking, combining them into one powerful. It seems called multiple creation. In other words, it uses as much magic as stars in the sky to restrain and neutralize the enemy. To our surprise, we still did not hold on and ask the Rhine if he had once had to see the true power of this spell. He, of course, easily replied that he saw. He did not look out of her eyes. She glowed brighter than all around. That is why he was madly in love with her in his past life. The girl managed to evade the teacher's blow. Seeing it, she smiled in surprise. The situation was not pleasant. The girl praised her teacher, noting that she could cope with any spell. But in fact, she almost did not enter into a real battle, isn't he? The teacher was angry and realized that it would be impolite to restrain itself. She lifted her staff and began to whistle again over the bones. The moment has come to the road. Exposing the staff forward, she announced that it was time to send her death brigade to the war. She advised her to fight a black mark as if it were a question of her life and death. The Rhine was surprised to notice the black flag. Elaria also did not hide astonishment and immediately asked where she knew these words. The teacher looked at him with an incomprehensible look and then smiled mysteriously. Did she really hurt her? Elrie was firmly in her hands and confessed that she really felt offended. Only one person can say these words. She has several questions to the teacher. Millis wondered what happened to Elria. Now she looked even gloomy than before. The ferret suggested that apparently the mood of Elria was ruined through the words of Alma. The girl turned, asking what happened to the Rhine, but the guy had disappeared. He was no longer behind them. The skeleton swung his sword on a girl, but suddenly stopped a powerful blow from the Rhine, which intervened in time. Everyone around the loudly shouted and asked what happened. He apologized for intervening, but could not just stand aside when someone uses his own words. Alma finally realized that he was also not ordinary. He did not use any magic exactly. But how could he so easily lift the skeletal center so easily? The guy introduced himself and said he was glad to meet the teacher. He added that if she answers his question, he will gladly answer her. The flag was so old and torn that he did not even pay attention to him. But when she spoke her words, there was no doubt. It really was the same flag. He wondered why she was holding Alton's flag. Who knows, perhaps, she does not understand what he is talking about. But until he is the first to answer, she is also not obliged to say anything. Suddenly, the question came from, "What are you doing here?" Could Eliza also see it? And as if in response, he came another exclamation. She really saw everything and even heard. Is she not full of mind? Using a 10th level spell on a student is too simple for her. Moreover, it created this magical object not for such things. If it breaks, it will be a lot of angry. The teacher listened to the reproaches, clicked her fingers, and the skeletons immediately disappeared. She shouted at the Rhine and he looked around. She unobtrusively reminded the boy about his question, suggested to discuss it later. He agreed, because their conversation was just interrupted. In any case, they all need to focus on magic and train hard. This is how they can become as strong as it. To do this, we need to try to fully and devote themselves to the path of magicians. Other classmates, seeing all this with their own eyes, felt true stress. They suddenly realized that they were quite different, unattainable to them, strength. The teacher decided to encourage the students, because each of them made so much effort to join the academy. Now it's no time to give up. By the end of the year, they will study with him, so it should be clear to them. She is convinced that in the end, each of them will become stronger than the others, so they should follow her. Now other children who have not yet come to their senses have to wake up. They will be taught one of the most important basics of magic. They should run until they lose consciousness. All the students rushed forward together. The head ran forward. The girls now took baths. After such a workout, it was exactly what they need. Elphia agreed that large baths are a real pleasure. In her native village, Milis went to Onins every day to swim, so she especially feels a lack of such an opportunity. Elria thanked her for calling here, but in fact, gratitude was mutual. She sincerely appreciated what she was brought here. Now let's get back an hour ago. The teacher asked why these guys have no endurance. She paid the attention of everyone to one couple, showing them and noting that only these two still keep well. They are already used to it. Elria seems to be the only one who can carry them because others are unable to move. However, they can still overcome this with the help of moving magic. If you say exactly, it is the magic of the 6th level. She lifted her classmates into the air. Melissa had to take a bath, so she almost offered to go to a common bathroom in a hostel. She immediately invited Elria to join them. The Rhine said that, as Milis called it, Illyria should really go with them. Because she goes on the road, Alma will raise in heaven for a while. She has a lot, but she can let go. Both relationships and even that flag. Mills watched carefully. Her gaze did not break. She noticed it. Having thought, Millis acknowledged that she was very unfair. She has smooth, silky hair, and her skin is tender and soft. She is so sweet, and her figure is just perfect. The girl was very embarrassed and confessed that she was too loud. But now she wanted to talk to her about something important. She decided to give one special friend a gift that, in her opinion, would become a true joy for him. The girl immediately guessed that it was a gift of rain. She shouted loudly, assuring everyone that she didn't say anything like that. But everyone noticed it at first glance. Did she realize that she was a real love for rain? But the girl denied stubbornly. I am convinced that she did not even show anything. She still wants to give him something in honor of joining the academy, but never gave gifts before. She only met these two for the first time, so she is not sure that she can give good advice. Yes, maybe just choose something that he really likes for him? Is it necessary to lubricate whetstones with oil? Some people think that whetstones can be used with oil, but in fact it is not recommended. After all, if you lubricate the whetstone with oil, then the water will no longer penetrate it properly, and over time it will kill and stop working well. Therefore, it is better to use only water and not experiment with oils. Miles is sure that he will be satisfied. Like a girl from the surrounding area, she also likes to take care of her tools, although Ilori was thinking about equipment and armor. However, instead of consumables, she decided that it was better to choose something more durable. These are memories. The girl listened to this advice. But whatever Julia did not think, nothing came to her mind. Then Millis asked if she decided to surrender too quickly. Although they have been familiar for more than half a century, how to add her age from the past life, it turns out that she is almost 200 years old, and this is a really difficult situation. It became too sad. In panic, Melissa was not to sink, because they met only today. Perhaps it is better to remember the moment when the rain brought joy. During the battle, a sincere smile appeared on his face, as if he were really happy at these moments. Lambert even asked if he became dependent on duels. But no, there was a completely different reason. When he competes with her, he always laughs and looks truly happy. She also dreams of giving the Rhine something that can cause the same sincere smile on his face. She thanked Miles. She hugged the girl firmly, passionately shouting that it was a real miracle. She even stated loudly, "The girl is a national treasure that everyone should appreciate." At heart, she envied the rain. She decided to give all herself, supporting all 100%. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the Rhine was waiting in the office. Alma came in and asked for a delay. Eliza read it for a very long time. The guy immediately replied that he did not need empty conversations, and directly asked where she had this alt-any flag. Alma didn't even know what Altine was. He asked her not to behave stupidly after she waved her charming artifact, but she told the pure truth. She really was wondering why he immediately chose this fabric for the flag. This means that now such a fabric is no longer taken for flags. As he told, this fabric is really intended for a special flag. Only those who have inherited this name can know about him. She asked to tell her who he was. He apologized, but he could not answer this question. She has the right to ask anything, but not that. She can ask any questions and look for answers alone. The girl immediately realized that he was inventing something. It turned out that now it all depends on Alma itself. Thanks to his answers, she could find out who he really was. But at the same time, if the guy is able to answer so as not to give himself, he will be able to earn his trust. Then she decided to ask him what he was thinking about systemic people. He replied that such people are serious and hardworking, even if they lack flexibility, but in fact they are not bad. If he had to choose a subordinate, it was these people that would be best suited for this role. Then she asked the next question, one more and then one more. The girl smiled thoughtfully when she heard all the answers. She decided to ask the last question, and he, looking at her carefully, asked if she was really confident in her decision. At first, the girl turned to him for you, but quickly made her shy and corrected, switching to a polite you. She wondered if he remembered her name and addressed him. Your High. Only one person has always called him so and never called a general. He immediately realized that he was facing Liot. The girl recognized him because he reacted exactly as stated in the note. He wondered if she had a family connection with Lioto, because her ancestor was called. It was Liot who created a memorandum and died. At one time he served as high bearer and remained with him until the end. That man left a note that has been stored for millennia. It proves once again how much his ancestor adored him. As agreed, she will no longer ask questions. For example, you will not learn how a person who lived thousands of years ago may remain alive. On this, the guy decided to stop. It was for the sake of this conversation that he came. He asked her if she knew something about the Altena. As she said, she knows nothing about such a country. The same goes for the flag. It was passed from generation to generation with this book. There is no mention of this country there. The Rhine asked about the hero or his name. Formally, such information exists, but they have been found only through magical research on elves and old-timers. However, none of the notes were stated. Liat always turned to him as Your Highness, but sometimes called it a general, although there was no word in service notes. In the end, it became clear. Someone intentionally tries to erase the memory of the hero. Does he really do this by manipulating his own memories? It seems logically impossible, but in real life there are often things that are difficult to explain. But why is this story still alive among elves? The girl decided that the case was probably in the ancient oral tradition. After all, the elves live for a very long time, and all their history is transmitted only orally. Stories from one generation to another, without any records or intermediaries. But once, 1,000 years ago, the elves and people were very close, isn't it? In those days, it was not considered important enough to pass from the mouth to the mouth. People would not tell others if they didn't think about it. And even when those people were gone, the oral tradition still lived further. He asked her to speak from now on if something happened. She was sure that she knew about history much more than him. She agreed, but inside she was angry. How did he dare to give orders to a man of his rank? In the end, her ancestors were revered and loved him, so there is nothing wrong with that. The girl suddenly wondered if El Rio could be the same as he. But instead of the answer, he left everything to her imagination. Then she finally realized. She had just made a controversy with a real sage. In general, he relied on her. She asked to entrust it to her. She is convinced that she will be able to handle this task on his own. A few days have passed since the conversation with Elma happened. The trials will begin the day after tomorrow. Miley wondered if any of them had plans for tomorrow. Isla dreamed of returning home to take care of magical artifacts. The Rhine made her remarks, and Elria, though praised the girl, still advised her to improve her combat skills. The girl called him a monster because she wanted a little entertainment. In the end, women rarely do something just like that. Everyone wants to receive their reward. Elia dorma on a chair. The Visa wondered how it could fall asleep. She became interested in the study of magic, and every time she went to bed later, because of which he was a little worried. Melissa believes that it is absolutely natural. Perhaps she makes an effort as a sage's heir, or just wants to leave something really valuable. The Rhine guessed that Millie learned about something. She asked directly if he had become too close with Alma lately. Vasil confirmed this by explaining that Alma was referring to the Rhine, Your Highness. When Bareg passed by, he immediately threw the image towards Lambert. The girl apologized. The guy was already annoyed as everyone praised her, and now she also raised a noise in the dining room. He quit with sarcasm. Does the common people be apologized? When she apologizes with someone with a higher status, she has to bow, touching the forehead of the earth. The girl was angry and apologized for the noise, but in fact, there was no need to resort to such extremes. After her words, the trout was not joke. He immediately decided that this common people should be punished. Friends immediately turned to him. He replied that the difference between them lies not only in status. To master the great magic of the sage, she lacks mind and knowledge. He swung to hit the girl, but Rin had time to close her. When the eggs of the eggs were dispelled, the Rhine turned to him, calling the boy. The eggs screamed, asking why he speaks with a representative of the Verminen family in such a rough tone. They asked if he was aware of what he had just done. However, Farag was not going to admit his guilt at all, because he tried to teach a common man. If he does not understand it himself, the Rhine should explain to him. Magic has already taken many lives, so when someone owns it and applies to another, it means that he is ready to die. He said something about being worthy to take advantage of the great magic of the sage. But, unlike him, the sage himself was ready to put everything on Khan to create a spell. If he wants to talk about himself, he must first achieve something with his own efforts, not rely only on the family. If he does not like it, it is worth stopping and showing what he is capable of himself, with dignity. But he sharply rejected the boy aside, stating that if he could not cope with the task, then he should be aware of his place. Fish despised him. He first called him a common man, and now Varvara. This guy seems to have learned nothing from life. He really deserves punishment. He broke his sword in half, and then the man shouted that it was a charming artifact. Now he will consider that they are quoting, and just drive him away. The Rhine approached Melissa and asked quietly if everything was fine with her. The girl began to annoy, insisting that all the most interesting things be done when El Rio wake up. The guy asked her not to be angry because she was drunk herself, even in spite of the loud noise. Lambat approached the girl and calmly said that it was impossible to sleep here. The girl rubbed her eyes sleepily and gradually woke up. She immediately jumped and rushed to the boy. Hugging him, she plowed even more. It was embarrassed. The Vistula said she fell asleep directly on it. It turned out that even in dreams, she was the same. He said they would go first. The ferret asked to leave him. He said goodbye to the boys, and holding it firmly in his arms, moved forward. He does not know what she is doing, but still asked her not to exhaust herself. The girl in a dream whispered that she wanted to be happy. It was a surprise for him. She sincerely wanted everything between them, as before. The girl suddenly woke up, saw that she was in her arms, and screamed from surprise. He warned her of danger and asked to stay in place. She believes that she should make a little more effort. The guy replied that she should do it in moderation. She thought why he did not ask why she decided to do it. He seemed not to suspect that she was hiding something or doing something dangerous. While he was around, she could relax and do everything she wants. The girl hugged him as a sign of gratitude. From a real battle to reaction in different situations. This is the exam will determine the evaluation of each student. It will be held in a specially designated place where all 8 classes can gather, and the location itself is under the control of the academy in the heart of the large forest. Behind the fence begins a dangerous area where the monster lives. Such creatures appear where many mana, because it creates the ideal conditions for them. Over time, paving with other beasts, they not only increase their number, but also expand the boundaries of their lands, so even now they are becoming more and more. Today's test will take place in the E-class area. There are many small and medium monsters. However, all greater creatures are already disposed of teachers. But this place is still dangerous. Their carelessness and pride can cause them. Life can be left here. They should never be forgotten. At this point, another teacher began to explain the true essence of this test. The scenario is, you need to save those who have lost in the danger zone. There are several dummies in the territory, and the task is to find them and deliver them to a certain place for a limited time. As soon as the dummies are returned, the exam will end. The more they find and bring them, the better the result. Someone asked if the exam was to be performed on their own, and whether it is necessary to put their own results in the first place and act separately from others. But Alma decided not to answer this question and left it without comment. The main thing in this test is to achieve the goal, namely to ensure self-rescue. Therefore, working together for this is a logical solution. Only 30 minutes left before. During this time, they can discuss everything with each other. The Rhine gathered everyone together, because they need to decide what to do next. Please realize that they only burden others with Milas, so he decided that it was better for them to go different ways. However, the guy refused. Without Elria, they will have to count on each other's support. Mila added that his strength of a completely different level. The guy explained to her that the purpose of this test was salvation. Dumas can't move. But if there were real people in their place? She realized that in such a situation, someone would be very scared. Easel and I realized that they could be injured and then they would not be able to move. In such a situation, you need to reassure frightened people, take care of their wounds, and also help them get to a safe place. It is extremely difficult to do all this. It is especially difficult for him because he does not have magic. He cannot care for the dummies, so this house is not able to. In addition, dummies are also magical objects. Millie realized that they would only be able to return them after they would provide first aid. There was also a likelihood that dummies could be hidden in the room, and many people may be needed to search. That is why the Rhine will be engaged in monsters. Weitzel will transport them with the help of a magical object, and Melassa will have to solve how all this works. Miles thought that the elite would not cope on its own, but it turned out that the director specifically instructed her to do everything herself. She said she would be difficult to condemn others when she is nearby. Elria agreed with the Rhine's opinion. Suddenly, the voice of Frank came behind them, who was indignant that they had not yet understood anything. Rhine, turning hello to him, called him a boyfriend, and noted that he looks quite cheerful. The Horn was offended because the age difference between them is not at all big, so he does not understand why he is called a boy. Then the Rhine wondered why the Horn hurried to them. The Horn believed that the true goal of this test is not only in salvation. Everything is still hiding something important. The instructor noted that there were no medium-sized monsters in the danger zone. But she said nothing about a giant monster. Anyone who can defeat this giant will get the highest score. But the boys decided to ignore him, and were already going to go, as he shouted that he had not yet said his last word. If you think it becomes clear, they are not even sure whether they can handle it, so it is impossible. It's hard to believe that they would have decided on it, but 4 has enough strength to give advice to a great monster. Seeing that the reign of the boys' magical objects suddenly stopped, everyone was surprised that it did not last long. He became so because it was he who broke him. With tears in his eyes, he said that the engineers somehow had repaired it yesterday. The skills of them are probably really good, but it is not necessary to overstretch so that something is not broken again. Farag became angry again, and his friends managed to pull him away, despite the fact that he was embarrassed before all. Today he is not afraid to behave from above. In the end, the Verminians achieved a lot of success in the curb of the monster. It required them a lot of effort. Almost it's time to go. Luria asked to be careful. The guy also stressed that since she should pay more attention to her safety. Even before the exam, these two were easy to flirt with each other. But since they are strong and can act at their own discretion, it is better not to interfere and leave them alone. The teams went on the road, heading where the monsters hide. The Rhine effortlessly won them without even using both legs. He had only one. Although the monster was great, in fact, it was weak for the monster. At least that's what he said effortlessly with one stroke of his leg. The Rhine restrained itself in order not to leave traces of blood. After all, the smell could attract other monsters and complicate salvation. There were really many monsters, and the Rhine was inadvertently worried about all right with Elria. However, it did not doubt it. Elria could easily deal with all these creatures, even using only the first-level spell. She can easily defeat an ordinary man alone using martial arts. Millie did not believe that such a sweet and fragile girl was capable of similar. For thousands of years of absolute peace and rest, magical fencing skills and martial arts have gradually stopped their development. Rhine's movements still aroused our curiosity, and it clearly pleased the hero. He decided to open him a little more. The ferret also loved the battles closely. He would gladly accept his proposal and listen to the advice. Millie can ask Elria to teach her, and then, by mastering self-defense techniques, he will be able to move quite differently. Suddenly, Vazel unexpectedly ordered both to stay in place. He noticed the cave ahead. The hero wondered if he saw the monsters near any monsters, but silence was dominated by the soul. This meant only one thing. There was a dummy inside the cave. The guy rushed forward, and the girl shouted after him, not understanding where he had such confidence. He suggested that, for example, she could get wounded, running away from the monster, and is now looking for a safe place. The dummies do not happen at every step, so you can guess that it is in a similar situation. Wiesel and Millis hurried to catch up with the Rhine. The cave was already visible ahead. It remained quite a little. The Rhine decided to move forward and instructed the Vistula to follow the situation and ordered me to help them both. When he moved forward, 5 dummies appeared before his eyes. The girl was surprised to see such a large number of people. According to the script, they had to run groups, so she decided to leave everything else to the boys. Weissel came across several manopas. He believes that if 2 or more people intervene in this case, they will simply disappear. This is how the Rhine said. He asked Melissa that she was thinking of a dummy next to her. She assumed that they were the same. Suddenly, one of the dummies was quietly squeak and began to move. The girl was not scared. Hearing their votes, the Rhine asked if everything was fine. The ferret replied that everything is under control, although it seems that the mechanism turned on. They noticed that the timer had already begun. Kastel decided that this doll was fatally wounded, and the timer showed how long it was rescued. It was necessary to act quickly, so she immediately took the healing. In the end, Elri acknowledged that her medical magic really helped. The dummy began to squeal again, and the girl screamed with fear. The guy shouted that she was really screaming louder than a dummy. But if it is just a wound, then the magic of healing should help. The Rhine thought it was important to provide first aid. Maybe you should check the wound or at least look at the dummy. The please found a place where magical energy has accumulated in the wound. The girl needs first aid for 5 minutes. The hero asks her not to panic, promises to explain everything, and says that the main thing now is to focus and not worry. He asks the guy to hurry and check the accumulation of mana. First, a wound. It is necessary to create an antidote and use cooling magic. The guy scatters a clot of mana. Then you need to clamp the wound immediately. But first it is necessary to put the fabric so that it inadvertently does not bite the tongue. If he loses his strength from the injury, he may be on the verge of death. You should first try to stop the bleeding if the wound is on the thigh. Then you need to lift it so that it is above the level of the heart. After that, carefully inspect the open wound again, and then apply therapeutic magic. It seems that the mechanism has finally managed to solve, and everything came into place. Melisse exhaled with relief, feeling the tension gradually disappeared. The Rhine praised the girl for his well-done work, and she sincerely thanked him in response. He also did not forget to thank the guy, but in fact he only checked his ability to accumulate, and everything he was able to do was only possible thanks to the girl. However, the hero did not agree with him. He supported Millis morally, and it was equally important. The guy wondered if the Rhine ever seen people standing on the verge of death. His instructions were extremely accurate. It seemed as if he told everything in detail, as if he were watching a man right now. The guy confirmed that. He saw with his own eyes both those who managed to save and those who could no longer help. Although these were only dummies, the work performed by rescuers deserved true respect. That is why he is grateful to them for saving him. Wai wanted to ask something in him, but suddenly the girl shouted, "Rain!" Angry ordered her to stop making a waste after every little thing. The girl screamed because they were approaching a stranger who carried someone on herself. But when the figure came closer, it became clear that it was Fortis-Egg with his 2 friends. Wessel hurried the Rhine to call 3 to them faster. He noticed that they were severely injured, and in the forest, someone or something began to move. The Rhine ran to them, and Fairy was surprised to appear. The hero immediately said to go to the cave. It was safe. Fairy could not believe that the Rhine carried 2 people at once. Inside, he was asked to tell what really happened. Did any monster attack them? Farag did not understand what had happened. He had no idea what a monster could hide here, and he could not even imagine what could wait for him in this place. We still called the Rhine, warning that things were bad. Although he did not see it with his own eyes, everyone understood. The monster that was moving was not at all like other monsters of this forest. The Rhine rushed forward and called Weisel with a girl. Each of them he ordered to take 2 and bring them deeper into the cave. He ran to a guard, frightened to death, and quickly confirmed that this monster really attacked them. The Rhine managed to pull him away at the moment when the monster was about to hit them. Most did not even realize what the monster was dealing with. It seemed to be stuck at the entrance to the cave, but everyone understood. It is only a matter of time when he would be able to move further. The hero addressed the guy with the question of whether they first started a fight with him. However, he denied it. In fact, the guy just predicted that the academy could prepare something, so he had a small intelligence in advance. When they finally collided with the monster, he froze with horror. The Shaft and Lucas immediately stood before him to protect, and it was then that, because he tried to do something extra because he was looking for a huge monster, everyone was injured. Then the Rhine asked the guy why he was crying. He managed to escape, although it seemed no chance, and even then he did not leave his friends and did not escape in despair. He can be proud of it. The hero, whom the please said that after leaving the cave, you need to create a barrier. Farag wondered if he was going to fight him. However, it was impossible. The young man was interested in whether there was a way to become a miserable magic. He reassured them, saying that there was nothing to worry about because he was not going to die. It will just win like a real hero. Thousands of years ago, brave warriors fought with the insurance and their main weapon was a flame. Alt-Ein is sent magical creatures that neither ordinary weapons nor magic can be damaged. The warriors ran in different directions, and among them stood the hero. He was shouted that he would die if he approached the monster, but he did not listen to anyone and still went forward, even despite the warning. He called a monster to himself and asked if he could handle his sword. The young man in loneliness saved both Alt-Ein and a hazard. It was because of this act that he received the honorary title of hero. Nowadays, the monster is insanely hutilo at the entrance to the cave, trying to break through. This monster is called an armored dragon. It feeds on the organs, gold, and magical ores, which is why it is able to reflect any magic. That is why she is the main enemy of the sorcerers. Furig asked where he knew it. He replied that there were many events around. He just felt it. But it is still too risky. Furig believes that it is better to wait for help from the academy. Although the help can not only come from there, Illyria could handle it if necessary. However, there is no time left. He asked Vissel if he brought a magical item to creating a protective barrier, and it turned out that even a few of them were. After that, he called Milos. He asked her to further treat the wounded. She had to find the strength to cope with it. She looked around and promised that she would handle everything and would surely save them. That's why I asked to send this monster directly to the stratosphere. The Rhine agreed with her words and rushed forward. He rushed directly to the monster, and he struck him with his fist in the muzzle. It turned out that the monster was much stronger than he thought at first. He just did not notice it before, because he always fought with her sword. The monster has grouped. The guy was sorry, but the monster would barely remember him. For him, all these people are weak, especially when compared to the sage. With one powerful blow, he threw away the monster far away. He hoped that he would break his neck, but it seems that everything was not easy. The monster before him roared again. His deafening cry rolled around, as if a warning of danger. On all sides, the same monsters began to stick. It looks like a reinforcement. He remembered it when he felt the earth under his feet. Now it was urgent to decide how to give others a chance to escape safely. He would hurt to battle with all these monsters Gaulois. They stared at him with their formidable views, and from their growls the earth under their feet trembled. Elri came at this point. She apologized as she was late. Elma asked her to bring the students because they noticed some unknown monsters. When she came, 10 dragons in the armor were waiting. Due to the lack of people at the academy, restrictions were removed. It became profitable for Milos and the rest. Now they were in the cave, and he asked to take them from there. The girl turned to Milos and asked if she heard her, which she received confirmation. Everything was fine from Milos. She was going to carry them secretly, so she asked the grace not to remove the barrier. Believers clear and received praise for this. She was called a good girl. She used magic on the cave to move them with it. Now everyone in the classroom was safe. The guy was surprised that she was able to pull them together with the cave, but the girl did not want to listen to the remarks from the one who tried to defeat the dragon barely. At that moment, she had a phone in her pocket. Alma was sincerely indignant that she sent them a whole cave. She suggested missing this issue and asked how her classmates feel, those who passed the exam today. Some of them were injured, but fortunately nothing serious. All teachers have already returned. These were great news. Now the dragon's brown in this area will disappear with the rain, so it asked to protect the students. The teacher wanted to deny. She never agreed to such, but the phone call was already broken. The girl turned to the Rhine and asked if she wanted to make every effort and try to full. The guy was surprised. He planned to deal with all one blow. That is why the girl decided to help him accomplish his plan. She thought about it constantly, how to get him to put it on full. She knows that thanks to her magic she will be able to hold it to the end. She forged a magic sword. Although too late, it was her gift in honor of his accession to the academy. The guy laughed, seeing the gift. The girl did not understand that he was so ridiculed. For him, this gift was very similar to her, so familiar and recognizable in her style. She wondered, what when giving him a sword created with magic? Only she could do this. However, the girl was convinced that this gift would bring him joy, which is why she decided to embody the plan. This word alone is not enough to express everything he now feels. Her magic has always been in battle with him, so she is sure that she can withstand his Manu. And only now she understands. For the first time they fight so, with each other. Now they are together. This is their united front after 1,000 years in the future. Because he received such a wonderful gift, he decided to show her his true strength. Although a long time has passed, his body still remembers what he was capable of. He asked the girl to look more closely. Now he wants to show her what a true cruel battle is. Over time, there was only a dead wasteland with a giant hole in the center at the place where the dragons used to live. He boasted of his skills before Elria, and it surprised her. Suddenly the sword in his hand disappeared, as if it were not. She asked, explaining that this sword would not serve forever. He reassured her, saying that it is very happy, so there is nothing to worry about. He felt real pleasure when he could finally be full. However, the most joy brought him a battle with her. She thought the same way. The teacher was already approaching them and noticed what was happening below. When Eliza learns about it, she probably will really lose consciousness. Seeing everything that was happening, Eliza did not restrain her tears and allowed her to use all her strength. His high respectedness also distinguished himself, breaking the monsters into piles. But who allowed them to change the land itself? The boys explained this by the fact that in the midst of the case, it became so fun that they were a little fascinated. In principle, Alma realized what they lead to. Behind Eliza shouted at Alum, so that she would not agree with them. How did the boys so easy to destroy the venue? Ellery said she made a sword with magic, and now the Rhine could use it to destroy everything around. The next time she promised to create a sword that could be used more than once. Eliza shouted loudly so that everyone was heard. She is sure to have the sword of a government. She also asked to show a little sympathy. So, she called Almi to find out what she had transmitted to her. There is no new information yet. However, part of the report seems to be torn out. In some way, the monster managed to reduce the harm from magic by twice. According to eyewitnesses, almost all of their magic was either reflected or scattered. The problem was not only in the peculiarities of the area. Even the true magic of the heroine became unstable and unpredictable. Even her death detachment was slowed down by that monster, and he effortlessly defeated her. Eliza realized that he could even affect the 10th level. This is extremely bad. Now they need to send a second request for reinforcement as soon as possible, and then she will find a specialist who will investigate. You should also try to interrogate students again. She called Farag, saying that she heard about his meeting with that guy, and even the fact that a fight almost flashed between them. Farag confirmed her words. During their search, they came across a mysterious creature. Valken and Lucas were near him, trying to protect him, so they were injured. Looking closer, he realized that it was a kind of dragon. To hide his mark, he walked through the entire field of high grass, and even set fire to several trees so that he was not noticed. After that, he decided to take them to the cave and wait for help. The teacher praised him for his good work. Even in such a dangerous situation, he made the best decision. But the guy just stood silently. She urged everyone to go to the temporary recreation area. They will not evaluate the results of this test. And about what happened, she asked not to discuss it without the permission of mentors. The monsters in this area were removed in advance. All school teachers monitored the territory closely, but no one noticed any monsters. This means only one thing. These creatures have emerged from nowhere, and the teacher confirmed it. They need to think carefully and carefully understand this business. The guy thought, if the attack of armored dragons is not just a case, then maybe someone is a third. The perpetrator may well hide among the students of the school. While the investigation is ongoing, they are forbidden to talk about it in public, and only 2 remain in custody. Others may be released. The Rhine denied, because they were also students. He asked permission to go home. In the meantime, the girl dreamed of eating something sour tonight, but Alba interrupted them of both and ordered them to silence. She grabbed them by the collar and pulled them. She appealed to the boy to let her talk to Illyria about this situation. He believes that the girl knows about the armored dragon more than he himself. At that moment, the girl agreed. To cope with these creatures was incredibly difficult. According to her, the guy realized, this creature is called an armored dragon. The Rhine was surprised, because it was the first time she heard about it. At least she never had to meet a monster that could influence magic. But more importantly, Farag assured that he knew nothing about it. Not only did they destroy the monster, his family gathered all the information about the monsters in each area. In this country, they have the most information about these monsters. Alma wondered if it was worth contacting Elria just like the Rhina, but the girl assured that she liked when she was told as always. Then Alma asked her to tell her what an armored dragon was. This creature looks like a dragon, but feeds on minerals. It is from these minerals that its strong shell grows, which is usually so solid that it can withstand even strong magical blows. But if these creatures are really able to dispel magic, then 1,000 years ago, most likely, someone specially fueled them with magical energy. Alma gradually understands what is happening. However, according to history, she knows about monsters who are able to influence magic. However, at her time, these creatures no longer exist, and this news is amazing the girl. Due to the danger that the witchcraft carried, they were ruthlessly persecuted and eventually destroyed to the last. In other words, in this era, the armored dragon should not exist. The couple walked forward, and suddenly someone's unexpected voice called them. Millie greeted them. The cell noticed that the conversation seemed to have been going on for a long time. Calling Elria, the Rhine said that he thought a little how to tell the two about their relationship. The girl, smiling, supported him. She also thought about it. The boys felt as if they were going on a fascinating hike. Milica was genuinely pleased that both of them were all right. I will thank you for their care. Vizel spoke about Vermin's comrades, that 2 of them survived thanks to the treatment of lemon balm. At that moment, the Rhine noticed how Farrig really began to move away. He turned to Lambat again, calling her a simple girl from the people. But when he heard his voice, she turned sharply and was frightened by his strange appearance. He said that it was thanks to her Valky and Lucas that remained alive, so he came to thank her. The girl waved him a little after him when he walked. Seeing this, the Rhine smiled. In a few days, the guy asked the girl to wait a minute, but she told her everything except she really wanted to hear. He shouted loudly to get up and didn't even think of falling asleep again. She still wanted to sleep and could not rise. In the meantime, the guy shouted that if she was late, Alicia would be very angry, will arrange a great scandal and may even break their engagement. In response, the girl quietly asked to hug her. He suggested that she put her on her back again, but the girl stood stubbornly on her own. She wanted to embrace. The guy cast his gaze on the clock and scored the girl again. He called her to himself, reaching out for hugs. The happy girl rose out of bed. He left her shape nearby so that she could quickly dress. The girl, without any shame, began to take off her clothes. But something did not work with the blouse. Then he wondered what had happened. It turned out that buttons did not coincide. However, she somehow fastened her clothes and thought that she would come down. The guy suggested trying again, but the girl invented the best way. She turned to him for help and wondered if he could help her. The guy froze in place, and in a moment he coped with everything. She said in surprise that it was incredible. He was a real master, like an experienced tailor. Some time has passed, and they finally got the academies. The guy rejoiced that he was able to do it. The boys were glad to congratulate him, and immediately asked if he was true that he defeated a huge dragon in the exam. They also mentioned that he defended others, even when he stayed himself. The young man asked who told them about it. It turned out that Farag told Shacy Glue when everyone was discussing what happened to those dragons in the exam, that they had won them. The egg noticed that they were looking at him, and immediately turned away. Iranian proposed to postpone the conversation for another time, because the lesson was about to begin. The boys greeted with a couple, and the girl immediately noticed that Elria today is not the same as always. The guy confirmed that today everything goes worse than usual. He tried to wake her up, saying that they were already sitting in the lesson. The sleepy girl asked why he was so close, but the guy replied that he was not him, but she herself. Only then did she realize that she hugged him without noticing it. She apologized and hurried to leave. He just waved his hand and reassured her, they say, nothing wrong. This is not the first time. The girl was surprised, because it was not the first time. The guy explained that she usually comes to her senses even when they come to class. Then the girl wondered what she was doing at such moments. He told how she wake up again. Another half sneak, she gently holds her hand on his head and, remaining in the linen itself, comes out of the closet. For some reason, the girl suddenly began to beat him. In the meantime, it was ordered, be sure to open your ears, while he tells it all. But even so, in their spare time, they often flirt with each other. The guy wondered if such flirting was really such an extraordinary. It seems that this behavior was a common thing to them. At this point, the Rhine wondered if they were so flirting with someone. Malaise could not understand these two. Weissel is sure that they keep the limit. She believes that it is important for family couples to have a wonderful relationship. However, both at the same time replied that they were not yet married, but only engaged. Then Weissel asked them not to be so synchronous in such strange situations. The couple exchanged smiles, looking at each other. Today they wanted to inform something important, so they were asked not to rush to return home. In a large room at the table sits a guy with dark hair. There are several people next to him, 2 girls and a guy in glasses. He really wants to share the important news with them. A dark-haired guy shows a thumb and says with a smile that Altine's inhabitants once called him a hero. A girl with long hair in response confesses that she was actually an elf, and in the past she was called a sage. The girl points to herself and tells that after thousands of years they were born again, have experienced many events, and now they are engaged. She stands next to the boy, hiding her hands behind her back. The guy in glasses corrects them on the postponement. His face is tense and serious, without any smile. The guy in glasses and a girl with short hair returns to a girl with long hair and a guy with dark hair, and they say that now everything is clear to them. The guy in glasses looks at the dark-haired and asks why they are so surprised. Dark-haired replies that he thought no one would believe in something so incredible. A girl with short hair with a warm smile and glitter in the eyes says that now they are sure of the real reason. The guy in glasses agrees with a girl called Miss Millis. He says that instead of believing in the appearance of some strange forces for no reason, He likes the idea that their abilities have a specific, clear explanation. Miss Millis is wondering if the Rhine is a hero. Then the dark-haired guy begins to say, "Thousands of years ago there was a country called Alton, who was constantly at odds with Welgat. A girl with long hair tells that the only one who can handle the sage Welgati was a hero named Drain. A girl with short hair noted that if this Rain is equal to the sage, his name would definitely remain in the chronicles." The guy with dark hair replied that they had already tried to find any mention, but did not dug anything. So now the chance to find hints is only in a completely different place, but they do not have enough people to explore everything on their own. The guy in the glasses says that his family is very ancient and has been supplying magical equipment to the royal family for centuries. Therefore, he will try to find the right thing. A girl with short hair asks if she can help. The black-haired guy tells that the place where Millis lived with the sheep Newburg was called Alton's Land. A girl with short hair is surprised to ask whether her native village was flowering and wealthy. The guy with dark hair tells that in his time it was a distant terrain that only a handful of nomads knew about. Millis first is angry, because her native land remained a simple province for 1,000 years. The girl with long hair noted that this place was beautiful and distant, to which Millis asked Elria not to call him isolated because her heart would not withstand. Elrias, full of excitement, notices that Millis is misunderstood. A girl with short hair opened her eyes wide, and her arms clutched her face, as if waiting for something amazing. Elria notes that this place is reminiscent of the remote territory where the elves once lived. The girl adds that it is possible that knowledge of this place has been passed from generation to generation by legend. The dark-haired guy took one step forward and, turning to the guy in glasses and Millis, asked them to help, and if they find out about something new, be sure to inform. The young man in the glasses expressed his joy that he was trusted, but immediately it became clear. They would talk about such things only with those who are trusted. Millis did not hide her astonishment, because it is difficult for her to believe it. As possible that a person who lived 1,000 years ago could be born again. The young man corrects glasses and, focusedly looking, warns, if someone tries to change the course of history, he risks to become a target because he has this dangerous information. The dark-haired guy confesses that it was for this reason that he hesitated, or to tell them the truth. His face became serious, and his eyebrows were worried about. A girl with long hair explains that it is simple. They only need to protect others, and there's nothing difficult for them. Mila smiles and says that such words give her hope. The young man in glasses confidently says he agrees. There is no place safer than being near them. His face radiates confidence when he speaks these words. A dark-haired guy tells that Alma also knows about it, except for two. Her ancestor was among those who used this knowledge with him. The young resident of Bospatius asks with interest whether this means that the magic equipment has survived for 1,000 years. Millis approaches Elria and carefully asks whether the descendant of Alma is really a friend of Elria. The Rhine says they know everything now, and apologizes that he has drawn them into the case. However, he asks if he can count on their help. The guy in glasses soothes everyone, they say. You should not worry. He is most wondering what power the Rhine has. And then he turns to a girl with short hair. This is a request from her only friends. The girl with a smile says they rely on her. She will do everything to cheer them up. A long-haired girl puts her hands near her face and thanks sincerely, looking forward. Another woman with long, dark hair comes into the room where a small company of people gathered. She calls to the Rhine and Elrea, and there is no smile on her face, just a harsh, serious expression. The Rhine is interested in the woman. Alma replies that the director is calling them. Suddenly, she notices cunning smiles on the boys' faces in glasses and a girl with short hair, and with suspicion asks what these smiles are. The Rhine and Elrea are following the Alma long corridor, while he says that she has already held a meeting with Eliza to decide how to act after the incident. Going to the big door, Alma knocks and calls Eliza, reporting that she brought with her 2 guests. Suddenly, the woman falls on her knees and bows to the floor. Her face is not visible. She bows her head low and sincerely apologizes, saying that she is very sorry for her act. Alma looks at her and, as she asks whether she must be bowed to the floor, because she is the director herself here. Eliza continued to sit on the floor and noted that someone clearly overdo it with force, but at the same time this person rescued students and teachers, organizing their evacuation. Nevertheless, neither the royal family nor the Magic Association wanted to celebrate his merits. Suddenly, someone's voice came from the side. Someone supported the decision and said it was correct. Eliza, all in tears, lifted her head and looked forward, looking for an answer in her voice. The Rhine said that to defeat the monster of a special rank with one blow is a real rarity because even magicians of this level often barely cope with it. Therefore, they cannot tell everyone openly and honestly. The Rhine, with a calm expression, says that it is for this reason that he does not object to such a decision. Eliza worships again and thanks him for the explanations and conclusions. Eliza wipes tears and says that the royal family and the Magic Association can no longer ignore the situation with the Rhine. However, as long as the source of his strength remains unknown, they cannot formally confirm his true power. Lisa says that Alma, a magician with a special title, will investigate the circumstances of this case and make a decision. The Rhine looks at a woman who smiles warmly with him and waves his hand, causing him a genuine interest. Eliza, with anxiety on his face, tells about the Rhine test and reports that all exams for special ranking were decided to be postponed. Eliza tells that she tried to resist until the end, because it was the same as not to recognize Rain. The Rhine acknowledges that his face seems calm. But suddenly Eliza raises her head and confidently states that she has not yet finished her story. Elria calls the director and says she also needs to say something. Eliza looks at a girl with a certain warmth and notes that if the market falls through it, one particular family will suffer. Elria states that he also wants to compete with a special level. Eliza frowns, lowers her head and asks whether she heard the words of Elria correctly. Eliza said that even with her restrictions, Ellie belongs to an unusually strong era. She is sure that if you tell someone that in the future Ellie will become a special magic, everything will work out. And Alma, meanwhile, expels the boy-girl. Alma quietly closes the door and exhales lightly. Without leaving the door, she rotates and asks if everything has succeeded and inadvertently smiles. A light, joyful smile appears on her face. The Rhine notes that this is a great job. They now have a good pilot for meetings and information exchange. Alma, in response, notes that her ancestors help, and she is, after all, their descendant. Alma proposes not to discuss everything in the hallway, but invites you to go to a cozy place where they will be able to talk quietly face to face. Alma, Rhine, and Elria found themselves in a cozy room where they sat opposite each other. Someone in a chair and someone is on a soft couch. The Rhine is delighted to note that Alma feels so casually in the room of her student. To which Alma waved, they say, "Nothing wrong, is just juice." Alma wants to learn from His Highness about his current opportunities. The Rhine tells that he just ate and trained, and everything happened by itself. Alma acknowledges that she was in vain with the question of the Rhine, and is interested in Elria's opinion on this. Elarius notes that to begin with, the magical abilities of the Rhine is quite unusual. For some reason, he received a unique magical power. She believes that his body became stronger thanks to magic, which is why the guy has increased significantly. Alma, with a serious expression on the face, asks whether it is true, that is, or its endurance is actually only a side effect. At that moment, everyone saw how a mighty magical force flows from his body to a sword and releases an incredible blow. In other words, he so skillfully has his complex and powerful magic that it can change the battlefield itself, simply bypassing its energy into the ground. A girl with long hair thinks and seriously says that he was able to suppress their magic. Just this magic is less saturated. There is no hint on her face, only a careful and focused expression. Alma is surprised to ask whether this means that the magical abilities of His Majesty have already exceeded the sage himself. A girl with long hair notes that it is likely that this magic of rain is mixed with something unknown. Her face remains serious and focused. No smile appears on her lips. The Rhine calmly and satisfied with cookies, noting that it sounds very cool, but adds, "Until it reveals its own magical strength, it will not be able to use magic." The girl hugs a plush toy and confesses that perhaps the magic of rain is not something natural. The girl appeals to the Rhine and asks if it is true that in his past life he is often ill when he was still a child. Alma thought and asked seriously whether it could all be a consequence of other magical power. The Rhine thinks for a moment and carefully explains. This happens when a foreign magical force passes through his body. The body immediately feels it and rejects it. Alma explains that the whole thing is that magic flows in the Rhine veins. This can be compared with blood transfusion. First, the body rejects another's blood, but over time it becomes accustomed to it, and the condition gradually stabilizes. The Rhine says he understands what everyone is talking about and asking. But isn't it surprising? A small drop of sweat slides him with his cheek. It leans a little forward with the whole body. Elrias says it is really very strange. In those days, almost no one knew about magic. The girl holds a soft toy on her knees firmly, leaning a little forward. In her eyes, curiosity is visible. She looks carefully forward. Emma tells that she learned from a report on a child who was seriously injured and was overflowing with more blood than it was necessary. Elrea adds that such cases have become known only by the achievements of modern medicine. 1,000 years ago, for children from poor families. Suddenly, someone's hand destroys a small bath made up of wooden cubes. Doctors have transfused large quantities several times. Meanwhile, the hands begin to mix scattered parts of the destroyed tower. The Rhine confesses that he really had poor health, but he has never been injured. His face is tense. He looks carefully aside where the girls sit. That is why someone tried to cause rain, using only their own magical power, although it is impossible now. In addition, they quite deliberately inspired him amazing magical energy, firmly convinced that it will work. Elria thoughtfully and seriously, without a single smile on his face, said that all this was someone from the distant future. Silence reigned in the room, and all, while remaining in their places, only silently exchanged views. The Rhine crosses his arms on his chest, and with a serious expression of the face says that it is because he is who he is, and never complains. The guy does not hesitate for a moment. He is fully sure of his words. Elria turns in surprise and asks if he is sure. The Rhine replies that if it were not for this force, it would have died on the sidelines 1,000 years ago. It was thanks to this power that he was able to meet Elria and live a happy life, so he is grateful to her for it. A girl with long hair and bangs smiles, and her cheeks are filled with a light blush. Alma says he can win a little time if she reports it gradually, and then she will be able to explore the rain. Alma admits that she was instructed to pass something to the Rhine. She reaches out her hand to the boy, and he, in surprise, asks what it is. In the hands of Rhine, suddenly there is a small leaf. He and the girl look carefully without hiding curiosity. It becomes clear immediately. It is similar to an invitation from the royal family. When a small car passed on a deserted road for a long time, the driver sits behind the wheel, holding his back even, and carefully leads the car through the night silence. The Rhine sits in its suit, raising the eyebrows and with a dissatisfied look. It is difficult for him to understand how Alma could just forget to pull out an invitation, because he would not have allowed the age of this. A few hours ago, the Wind's mansion is a large house with many windows and spreading shrubs around, descending to the very street. Several windows glowed in night darkness. The pretty girl is turning around, falling asleep, and asks with the threat if they were really invited to the castle this evening, and how long they still have. The Rhine and Elviria are standing nearby, and they are aware that they have about 2 hours left. Hearing this, the girl begins to get angry. She raises his voice and hurries them, demanding that they finish immediately with preparation. The Rhine returns to the girl nearby and, as a sign of dissatisfaction, clearly makes several dissatisfied sounds. Elrio, too starred, notes that she does not like a party at all. The Rhine emphasizes that it is a direct order from the princess and asks Elria to restrain himself. In response, the girl is in a matter of that it is difficult to move in the dress, and if she is too whispered, then the hairstyle will ruin. The Rhine notes that the girl tried to look soap and would be a real loss to ruin this image. The girl turned her eyes and with a serious expression of her face confidently stated that she would become a necromantian. The guy and the girl leave the car. Nearby stands a man who shows where they go, and the couple follows his clue. They walk around, almost touching each other. The Rhine and Illyria go a wide area, holding hands. The guy confesses that he could not even imagine that he would be here. The middle-aged man bowed slightly and calmly reported that he was already waiting for Elria, which was known here as Win, and she was once the rules of Frieden. There was no emotion on his face. He seemed completely balanced. The man told that he is the caretaker of Her Highness. He is the chief bottle of Selvis and is happy to get acquainted with her. Rainbows say that they came here at the invitation of Her Highness, and Wester thanks them for their courtesy. He is glad that the arena has not changed at all. Meanwhile, Rana looks from behind the boy's back, watching everything that is happening. The Rhine apologized because this girl is very shy. Ballerina understands it well. Even a little bit of Alea was always hiding behind someone's back. Suddenly, Elri sharply turns her head away. The Rhine notices this and looks at the girl who has begun to be questioned. Elria asks for a dissatisfied expression on his face, where the man she wants to know is located. The Bogretsky replies that he now keeps Her Highness with his magic. The girl assures that if it is the magic of Silvis, then she is calm. The Rhine looks at her in surprise, not expecting to hear that the princess is restraining someone's magic. The Bogretsky, keeping an unmoved appearance, says that he is pleased to hear such words. The Bogretsky politely asks for permission to hold them through the castle. Everything is ready for singing. Suddenly, the door opens behind the back of the butler, and a strong wind rises in the castle corridors. Suddenly, a mysterious figure appears behind the rain. The girl in a lush dress exclaims the swearing, seeing that Elria has finally appeared. The girl in the crown and a lush dress with long hair, with a serious and proud expression, says she is almost boring. In the charming kingdom of Welgat, the first princess Christi Avon Welgata stood, confidently resulting her hands in the sides and strictly looked forward. She exclaimed her girlfriend's name and went straight to her. Princess Christia von Velgate ran to Eller and hugged her firmly. On the emotional rise of the princess exclaimed that she missed the girl. Ellery stood in full surprise without waiting for such a meeting. Princess Christia von Velgate hugs the girl even stronger. She confesses that she missed her, because it has been 3 years. The Bogretsky says that Her Majesty has known Elria since childhood, and treats her as a sister. The queen was so attached to her that the king even ordered not to return home until Elrias completes her studies. The princess returns to the Rhine and wants to find out if it is true, but her groom is silent. Her face takes a strict look. The Rhine puts his right hand on his chest, trying to politely say hello to the princess, but does not have time to finish his phrase. The princess asks her to turn to her simply, and in a friend, calling her just Chris. She also promises to contact the boy for you. The Rhine bows again and thanks her for her attention and care. The princess squeezes her hand into his fist and presses her to the breast. With a strict appearance, she states that the guy received only half approval. The Rhine carefully appeals to the princess to explain what it is in mind. The princess says he does not recognize his sister in engagement with the boy. The Rhine replies that these words mean that it is doubting its abilities. The princess turned her head and scolded, saying that it is difficult for her to believe, as if someone who is unable to use magic could compete with Elria. The guy smiles and wonders if the princess really invited him to test his ability. Princess Chris proudly crosses his arms on his chest and raises his chin. She asks why the guy behaves as if it were a common thing to him. The guy confesses that he is not used to such, but has already prepared because Elrea has a surprisingly outstanding talent. His glory as a prominent sorcerer, which is proud of the whole country, spread far. Perhaps even the princess will be able to explain his strength. The princess turns to her sister and stifles with surprise that the guy was much capable than she thought. The girl, looking at the boy, asks, "Is he not amazing?" Chris pulls his hand and shouts that she and his strength does not recognize, and himself. The Rhine constantly states that it all depends on its kind. But the princess explains that he just needs to do something to gain recognition. She emphasizes, there are things more important than origin. The princess explains that everything she teaches a guy is just a test to check how much he loves Elria. The young man looks ahead without realizing what is happening. Behind him, the butler calmly orders the employees of the bath to go to the castle. Chris shouts loudly into the microphone that the first test in the competition has come. "Who loves Elrea more?" asks the presenter. Inspirational audience exclaims and bounce with delight, watching this cheerful action. The Rhine wondered why so many people gathered here. He thought they would only meet the two. The princess smiled and explained that today there was a traditional feast at the yard, so she invited everyone to a small spectacular action. The princess notes that everyone who works for a long time in the palace is well known to Elrea, so they are wondering who will become her bride. The Rhine bows slightly and notes that it is a very thoughtful observation. The princess turns to the boy, clearly calling his name and notes that she has already learned everything about him. The guy lifts his eyes in surprise and dies, open his eyes wide. Princess Christie from On Vulgate says that the Magic Academy, despite being incapable of witchcraft, still helps the flowering of his native village. But even after all this, she still cannot admit that he is worthy of her sister. The princess falls on his knees and shouts what she seems. He takes Elor. The young man sits on a small chair, hesitates and embarrassed, not knowing what to answer her. The princess leads his head and looks away. She says that even if there was no witness here, she would still check if his true love for Elria. The butterflies explain that Chris loves Elria very much, which is why he behaves so strange. The competition between these two entrusted Selvis. Princess Christia von Welgeit appealed to Selvis to stop it all. In her words, there was a hidden threat. Selva says that everyone who works here is already aware of it and very much hope for the rain. In the large hall, people begin to laugh and discuss it lively. With the calm face of Selva says that the one who knows Elria best will win. And Elria herself, meanwhile, was comfortable on a soft chair, which is a little higher than Chris and Rhine. Elria sits embarrassing. Elria cheeks are burning with shame. Her face is covered with a bright blush, and the girl dreams of returning home as soon as possible. Princess Chris rotates and exclaims the whole voice that even the embarrassed Elria remains charming. On this scene, the Rhine and Selva only look at the princess. Chris does not stand and rushes to flee to El Rey, because it is difficult for her to stay still. But her body is squeezed by strong chains, and the village strictly warns. To touch on El Rhea is strictly forbidden. I take Chris by the hand and leads it back. The Rhine watches them with surprise, thinking that the princess had just escaped from his eyes. The nobleman smiles and apologizes to the Rhine, and Selvis is wondering if the guy has something to say. The Rhine is a little confused, confesses that I would like to say a few words. The Rhine says that a lot of time has passed with their last meeting with El, but promises to do everything to let those who are now. Princess Christia von Welgeit says that Elri has known since childhood. She remembers that the girl loves and what? No, and even recalls how many times Elrius shed her afternoon tea and what he was. Selva explains that you need to press the button to answer the question, and Elrea will ask questions and evaluate everything that is happening. The girl lowers her gaze and unexpectedly realizes with surprise that she will have to do it. Selva apologizes for the inconvenience, but explains that many wanted to hear the voice of Elrea. Elrea takes a piece of paper in his hands, worrying and uncertainly tells he will try. Elrea is ready to ask her first question. Princess Chris suddenly escapes that she is amazed at the beauty at, and the Rhine watches over Elrea. Princess Christie from Onvolgate suddenly exclaims what Elrea is. Salva strictly warns, if this is repeated, the princess is waiting for punishment. Elrea hides his face behind the newspaper. The Rhine proposes the bottler to read the questions on its own, believing that it will be the best. The bottler agrees with this thought. The Bogretsky holds a sheet and is already preparing to voice the first question. But he only has to say half, as a call is heard. This means that the participant already knows the answer. Chris replies that it is not just about books. El Rio is admired by reading in general. He gladly studies even scientific articles on magical research. The butterflower turns to Elria and asks if everything is true. The girl, smiling, begins to nod in response. Silva reports that Princess Christie from Onvolgate answered the first question correctly. The princess stands with his hands crossed on his chest and smiles happy, rejoicing in her victory. Chris turns to the Rhine and is interested in saying that he will say. The princess jokes whether it is necessary to listen to the question to the end to answer. The Rhine says that it does not have to listen to the issue to the end. Princess Christia von Welgate asked not to tell her that the Rieni, the bridegroom of Illyria, would not be able to answer any question until the very end. But the Rhine hurried to reassure the princess. They say, it is not necessary to worry. He was simply amazed at her lightning reaction. The Rhine turns and raises his head a little to where Elijah stands. The guy's face is visible. Elria gets up and squeezes his fists, full of confidence that the Rhine is able to answer all the questions. The girl's cheeks are covered with an excitement. The Rhine turns away, a little embarrassed, because he is well aware that Elria is very much hopeful. The Bogretsky begins to ask the second question, but this time he does not have time to finish him. Chris interrupts him. The princess confidently states that the answer is her favorite soft toy, Black Dog Wally. The Rhine looks with a serious facial expression and realizes that the princess uses magic. The Rhine recalled at what lightning speed Princess Christie Ivanovna Welheit reacted during their first meeting. It was already familiar to him from the past. The Rhine realized that Chris seems to guess the question before he sounds and immediately answers. In other words, Chris' speed is unattainable for others. The princess stands confidently, crossing her hands on his chest and smiles, looking directly in front of him. Elria returns to Selva and asks if he himself can come up with the following questions. The Bogretsky looks at the Rhine, and he, raising his head, closely monitors Elria. Sel says he understood everything and asks Elrea to start. Elrea takes a microphone, hesitates a little, and asks, "What is your favorite seasoning when you are very tired?" Princess Christie from Angvit wondered if her question was too specific. Ellery assured that no, and explained that she was just what she was thinking about. Ellery lowered her gaze on the Rhine, who also watched the girl carefully. A wide smile blossomed on the face of Elria. The cheeks blushed slightly, and real happiness was shining in the eye. The Rhine presses this button, and, lowering his head, confesses that Elria loves salty dishes, so her favorite seasoning is ordinary salt. Selvus notices how Elria just shines with joy. She jumps and waves her hands. He says the Rhine answered the question correctly. Elria raises the fourth question. The girl is wondering what he is guided by choosing food in the school cafeteria. The Rhine, feeling sinking, confesses that Elria always takes other dishes than he wants to divide everything in half. Elria goes to the fifth question. She is interesting to raise his eyebrows and asks that the girl did after she lowered with Melissa in a large bath. The Rhine feels the cheeks covered with an even deeper blush, and she answered. The girl remained near the dining room, and then bought desserts for both of them. After that, they returned to the Rhine's room together and drew sweets, dividing this pleasant moment. Elria is red, shyly asks what he usually does before going to bed. Rain again presses on the button and adds that the girl is spinning on the bed, trying to take so much space so as not to touch the guy. Princess Christia von Welgeit asks why he is ashamed if it says straight. Chris, having twisted it from dissatisfaction, notes that such questions only confirm how close they are. She is sure that even now, when no one sees, these two are still feeding each other. Selva in response only laughs and says they actually do it just in the middle of the dining room, not hiding. Selvis lifts his head and, barely smiling, reports that the next question will be the last, so he suggests Elria. Elria is wondering what she likes. Chris and Ryan lift the look to where Eli stands, trying to understand her mood. They did not understand what the essence of the question, and Princess Christian von Welgeid even asked what her friend meant. On the faces of the Rain and Princess, he was surprised, and the village also looked at Elria, although his expression remained calmer. Focusing, the Rhine clicks on the button. He confidently says that Elria enjoys warm milk tea. Celeste returns to Elria and is wondering if she has an answer to her question. Elori folds his fingers, showing that the answer is wrong. A large red label appears in front of the Rhine, and the guy looks at it. Selva explains that the Rhine was mistaken when he answered the question. Elria closes her eyes and says he will not say the answer. Selphus immediately understands everything and says that Elria will not reveal this secret. Elria nods confirmation and attaches the index finger to the lips. She says it's a secret. The girl's face looks happy and cunning. It passed for a while, and the Rhine with the elite stood side by side. The Rhine turned to Selva and reported that they wanted to stay here and have a little rest. Selva realized them and said they could turn to him if they needed something. Illyria strongly takes a small glass and drinks everything. Near her stands with the Rhine, smiling and watching the girl. Many people gathered around the Rhine and Elria. Everyone was passionate about what Rhine is a wonderful man, and what a happy Elysia, who is near him. The guy and the girl were carefully considered the audience, interested in their reaction. Elria recalls that as a child, when she was not even in the royal palace, Chris was always near her. She couldn't think that so many people would worry so much for her. Although Princess Christ was very energetic from Valgate, life is lighter. The boy and girl fit the princess and praises them with a smile for a perfectly done work. Reyna notices the princess, slightly stuck his hand on his chest. The Rhine smiled and thanked the princess for a wonderful opportunity, as well as because she introduced them to the palace staff. Princess Christy von Velgate smiles awkwardly and confesses that, although she first told the extra, now realizes, the Rhine is really a good person. The princess did not expect to see such warm relationships between the Rhine and Elria. She confesses that she called them not just that, she really needs their help. In the sky hangs a large full moon that shines brightly, pouring silver light everywhere. The face of the princess seems sad. She slightly bent her head and looks down. The princess calls Rhine the hero Altan and notes that he seems to have really appeared to him. The Rhine scatters his hands to the sides and replies that a long time has passed, and the girl in response again makes the same harsh face. The Rhine turns to a princess named Tiana, and the princess herself stands with her hands crossed on his chest and looks formally forward. The Rhine confesses that he felt as if Princess Chris reminded him of him, but for a long time he could not remember who exactly. In the end, he still realized. The face of the princess is so similar to Tiana, whom he has long been familiar with. Tiana says that the Rain, when he is still young, looks surprisingly attractive, and she would never think that old Birkin could look like that. He is also surprised to have changed a little girl who has recently burst into tears after defeat from an old man. However, he still annoys her. The Rhine notes that Tiana seems to have not been reincarnated in this world. Tiana explains that with the help of magic, she has moved only her consciousness here and now, temporarily uses the body of Princess Christian von Welgate. El Rea turns to Tiana. The Rhine and princess closely watch the girl, watching what will happen next. The princess smiles, and the light blush appears on her cheeks. Tiana nods silently, confirming the words of Elria. Elria finally realizes that Chris was the same Tiana. The princess looks forward and asks again, not believing his eyes. Elrea began to tell how Chris often kept near her, but did not have time to finish her opinion. The princess explained that most often it was Chris, although sometimes Tiana changed her places. Illyria remembers how she stayed in Chris at night, and she persuaded her different clothes. However, now she does not have time to talk about it. The princess only adds that Chris suggested to her, because she wanted to show what Illyria would look the best. Elria proudly stands in front of the princess, calls her in the name of Tian, and then pronounces the word, lecture. The princess immediately falls on his knees and gladly agrees to do so. When Elria quarrels Tian, she says she doesn't want to be happy at all. The princess only smiles in response and confidently denies. It is impossible because she will still be happy. Tears appear in Tiana in her eyes, and she says she will finally be able to talk to that girl. She feels true happiness and cannot restrain her tears. Tiana sincerely sought to restore the connection with them as soon as possible, just as it was 10 years ago. She really wanted them to say her name with a smile on her face. The scene rejoices from the fact that she had the opportunity to meet Tien. Elria sits next to the princess and says it has been 10 years since his death. The girl guesses that Tiana should become quite adult during this time. The princess agrees and adds that Tiana is already higher than this girl. The girl believes that Tiana still remains a real beauty. The princess agrees with this, but with sadness he adds that he cannot show his beauty to others. Tiana sobs loudly, trying to wipe tears, and her cheeks appear a light blush. The princess apologizes, confessing that she has almost no time left. However, emotions take the mountain, and it cannot restrain itself. The Rhine looks forward with a serious expression, and notes that if Tiana finally opened, then she has important words for them. The princess gently erases the remnants of tears from her face, which is already covered with a light blush, and confirms her words. It adds that this also applies to the connection that combines it with Chris. The princess stops in front of the boy and the girl and announces that he first tells why Elria died. The girl responds confidently without hesitation in her words. On the floor lay a girl with long hair and ears. Next to her, a cup from which the liquid spilled. Tiana explained that Elria has lost her life because she has no magical power left in it. A middle-aged man looks at his comrades and says that they seem to have already fulfilled today, so you can go back. He appeals to the guy behind him named Liat. Ice turns to a man, "You're high," and notes that it would be strange if only he was followed. The man goes further and calmly, answering, "Good, let it be like that." Middle-age rotates and says that the fewer people are near him, the easier it will become. A barely noticeable smile appears on his face. She clearly emphasizes confidence in her own words. Suddenly, something from the man flies into the air. He moves back and watches with surprise. The small fragments fly all over, almost touched it. A middle-aged man takes a step back and welcomes Tiana, a girl with a longing bundle hairstyle. Behind stands Liget and watches in surprise. The girl suddenly rushes to her husband, trying to attack him. The man goes to the side, throwing the remark that the girl is moving too slowly. The girl does not have time to stop and rushes straight forward. Her face has a slight surprise mixed with fear. At this point, the man puts her footsteps. Tiana sharply turns straight in the air, extends her hands, her eye closed. There is a tension on the man's face. He notices something and now looks carefully at the place, interested in the new detail. The man dropped on one knee, and around him began to climb fragments, lifting a thick cloud of dust into the air. Suddenly, huge magical circles broke out over the man. The man raises his head and says that Tiana's magic annoys him as always. On his face, there is a mocking expression and a light smile. Tiana falls to the ground and shouts loudly. The man continues quietly in place and watches her. Suddenly, a girl who sits on her magic stiff is appearing in the air in front of Tiana and says, "Tiano, do nothing that you have not asked for." The girl says that Tiana has been over again. Tiana gets down, lowers her head and apologizes. Suddenly, a bottle appears in the girl's hands, which she quickly lifts to the mouth of Tiana. The girl orders her to drink a potion that returns magical energy. A man lying on earth laughs and says that Tiana is spending his magical power very quickly, and I still have to train 100 years before I can compete with him. Leet explains that it was the magic of a jump in time, and few but a man would be able to resist her. The man adds, "In order to resist such a spell, you need to not only understand how this girl thinks, but also to anticipate her steps. Then it is quite realistic to cope with such magic." The man returns to LAT and assures that he is also under the power. The guy adds that he can usually analyze it, but is not able to stop. On the face lie down, peace and even a single trace of excitement. Elria and Tiana are sitting in the room at a large table. The Tiana's head lies on the table as if she were tired or thought. Elria holds a book in his hands and is immersed in reading. Tiana returns to the girl and asks what she needs to do to stay in the world of time longer. Sadness is read on the face of Tiana. The girl holds a book in her hands and thinks that when Tiana is in the world, she turns her business through magical power. Tiana confirms this and adds that a lot of magical energy is consumed for this purpose. Tiana tells that now she seems to be grinding in front of her eyes from the near future. All her affairs seem to be moved forward, and she can only move jumps of 10 steps. Tiana begins to be angry and confesses that she has recently learned to transfer only her consciousness to the future. She saw a little further than before. However, even with this new ability, she still cannot defeat the soldier, and it is very upset. Elria bows his head and says that it already goes beyond the ordinary, the level of souls or even gods. Tiana notes that theoretically this is possible, so there is a chance. The girl raises her head and says that Tiana is a man, and she is difficult. But for elves like her, everything will be much easier. Tiana shouts the name of the girl loudly and confesses that she was waiting for her behavior. In response, the girl smiles and says that he appreciates in Tiana the ability to praise others sincerely. The girl looks thoughtfully at her mug and says that she has ended tea, and even Elry is a little upset because of it. Tiana suddenly rises sharply from her seat and rushes to the exit. Without turning, she throws, "I will brew more now." Subsequently, Tiana, together with his servants, goes to perform cases. One of them assures that she may well trust such daily responsibilities. But Tiana refuses, explaining that this time she wants to take tea to Elria. Tiana goes to the room and immediately apologizes to the girl for making her wait. Suddenly, the tea kettle flies to the floor and breaks, and all the liquid inside is poured around with the debris. Elry lies on the floor. Tiana runs rapidly to her, and her baby's face reflects a true horror. One of the servants shows a finger on Tian and shouts something in her direction, while the other maid is in a hurry runs away. Tears appear in the eyes of Tiana. She does not stop screaming. Her eyes are wide open, and the girl does not look at El Rey, which no longer gives any signs of life. After the death of El Rey, Tiana dreamed of seeing her alive at least again. Tiana sits over the girl's body and cries bitterly. Desperation has no limits because Tiana is looking for a way to turn back with magic jumping in time. Tiana stands with Elria's staff in her hands and looks carefully at him. She believes that with this magical thing, Elria will be able to succeed this time. Tiana presses the staff to his cheek, closes her eyes, and a barely noticeable smile appears on her face. Tiana rises into the air and notices that he is in a dark room, the walls of which are decorated with many different paintings. One day, Tiana noticed a hole in the tunnel. Time. The girl looked around and saw something shining there. She began to look at the hole with interest. Squeezing Elk with staff even stronger, Tiana looked forward. At the same moment, she plunged into the hole. Having passed through him, Tiana was unexpectedly found in the world that existed 1,000 years later, in the mind of little Chris. She stood and watched the other girl gently huddle to the woman. The girl returns and looks at Tian. Suddenly, Tiana hugs her firmly. This girl is incredibly similar to Elria. To make this future a reality, Tiana assumed the role of a wise mentor. The girl stands with a cape on her shoulders, looking carefully, and her eyebrows are barely frozen. They united with the residues of the Altai army, which was left without their hero. Liet stands, and tears flow on his cheeks. Litten and Tiana shook his hands. Together, they were able to destroy the Altane Empire. Rin stands, lowering his head, and a clear sadness is read on the face. Elrea, as if not noticing it, looks forward with interest and asks Altine again. Tiana tells that he is now trying to spread the magical techniques that Elria invented, all over the continent. Elry and Rhine listen carefully and watch Diana shares her history. Tiana tells that in order to move 1,000 years to the future, she needs 2 things, Chris as a conductor, and a charming artifact of Elria, which stores all her magical power. Tiana says she can't make holes in time. Rhine's face, which stands next to Elria, expresses a real surprise, and Elria listens carefully to the story of Tiana, which is now in the body of Princess Christia von Welgate, and she is extremely interesting. The princess explains that because of the bone in time, you can no longer travel back or forward, so you can assume that someone has either transformed or jumped in time. Therefore, Tiana first had to make sure that the hero in this world was able to reincarnate, and only then to discover her true essence. Princess Christian von Welgate also suspected anything. Elria sincerely thanks Tiana for everything she did for her. Tiana comes up, straightens, and looks forward with a smile, and her cheeks appear a light blush from the words of Elria. Tiana says it's time to return. Elria smiles and notes that this only country they created together is now even more beautiful than 1,000 years ago. The girl holds the boy's hand, and he looks forward with a light smile on her face. She asks to convey to the residents of the former Altina that now they are happy in the future. Smiling widely, Tiana rejoiced so that tears appeared in her eyes, and the cheeks were slightly bad. She strongly promised that she would fulfill the girl's request and be sure to give all the inhabitants what she was asked. It has passed some time. The princess and the girl sat together on a large bed, surrounded by many soft pillows. Princess Christia von Welgate threw one of the pillows high up and stated with a smile that they did not spend the night together for a long time. 2. Belvria confesses that she was surprised by Chris's dating, and Princess Christian von Welgate sits closely and watches her sister with interest. Princess tells that Tian does not really know. It is only one of her versions. She did not even suspect that Tien was her distant ancestor. Princess Christiev van Welgate says Tiana supports her feelings for the girl. The girl crosses her arms on her chest and notes that Tiana and Chris are very similar as two drops of water. She also notes that the princess says a little differently than usual. Princess Christy Ivanovna Wilguide confessed that it was done to make a certain impression. The girl in response sincerely admitted that she did not expect to hear that. The princess tells that she has been talking about her for a long time as a weird lady with an unusual manner of language. Now no one is surprised by the fact that she communicates with Tiana. Moreover, the princess has recently become famous among ordinary people, gaining popularity because of their weirdness. Princess Christia von Velgate is not going to ask Elria questions because she has learned a lot from Tiana. She understands that if she learns about Elria even more, he may have to change her mind about her. Chris assures that Elrias will always remain a friend, regardless of the circumstances, because he wants to be near and support in a difficult moment. The princess begins to talk about Rain. She confesses that she believed Elrias can be entrusted to him. Elrea looks forward with a wide smile and a light blush on the cheeks. A girl with long hair thanks Princess Christia. Princess Christy Oben Welgite says she doesn't need anything. She only asks Elria to allow him to take a picture where she holds one charming object. However, Elria is hesitant, because the photo she will still not be visible. The events take place at the Royal Academy of Occult Magic. On the street, it is already dark. The stars are shimmering brightly in the night sky, and warm light is pouring from the windows of houses. Millis and a young guy in glasses are sitting in a room similar to a cozy cafe, a meal. Visitors also housed around the tables, and waiters walk quietly between the rows. Millis sighs and says she is bored when there is no rain. Then the guy is wondering what the girl plans have this weekend. Melissa felt true joy when Vizel asked her this question. The girl with a smile reported that she was going to go to the capital to have fun. Her face showed genuine passion and happiness from the future adventure. The young man in the glasses is quietly sitting on a chair and wonders if Millis will go alone. The girl nods, confirming his words. She is still smiling, and at the same moment she begins to fall back, and we remain in our places. Miller slides on the floor, raises and understands. Elria is not nearby, so she will have to go alone. The young man in glasses raises his hand and also asks to go with the girl. Melisse is raised and looks at him in surprise, asking whether he really wants it. The young man confesses that he wants to collect materials to create a new magical subject, because in the past test he felt almost useless. Millis is immediately indignant and, looking at him, states that the young man in glasses actually helped everyone. Millis tells that Vizel is very well aware of other people's feelings and always near it when needed. The guy does not quite believe in it and asks with doubt if it really is. Millis continues and adds that Vizel is also very good. We are unexpectedly turning, and Millis begins to worry whether she slaps something extra. The young guy nervously corrects his glasses. His cheeks are red, and he finally explains that a girl with short hair has confused everything and told not as it really was. Millis and Weissel are in the capital of the kingdom. Millis looks forward and notes that something is moving the city. Weissel explains to her that the residents move the city on trams. Millis confesses that he dreams of riding a charming car. This is explained by Vizel that such machines overcome long distances, too expensive and only aristocrats. He also adds that they usually use trams only in the city center. Millie notes that the guy is understood not only on magical equipment. The guy replies that the master is a common thing for the master. The girl stops near the store and says that she was born just to get here. She puts her arms in his sides, her legs places at shoulder width. The young man looks at the sign and in surprise notices that he is a black tea store. The carriage is a strange young man who notices a boy in glasses and a girl on the street and recognizes them immediately. He looks out of the window with interest, watching them. Meanwhile, the guy with the glasses, along with Millis, goes to a small shop. The man opens the car door and informs his driver that he will return this time. The driver tries to stop him, addressing, "Sir." The girl and the guy went to the tea, where they served black tea. The girl happily noted that she was expecting to see incredible beauty, because it was from here that tea was supplied to the royal family. Her eyes glowed with happiness and admiration. The guy has wondered if tea brewing is a girl's hobby. She hesitates a little and admits that it was not her hobby before, but now he is. On her face blossoms sincere joy. The girl takes the box to her hands and says that it is perfect for Elria. Here, special leaves. The young man smiles and adds that sometimes drinks this tea himself, and his action is really strong. The girl says that if the guy states so this tea really works, because he strongly loads his eyes. The young man notes that he should protect his eyesight in order not to worsen him even more. The girl asks if his vision is really so weak. Then the guy shoots glasses, confirming her assumption. The guy leans closer to the girl, so their faces almost touch. He says he can look at her face only from such a close distance. The girl's cheeks are instantly covered with a bright blush. The young man wipes glasses, thinking thoughtfully how to invent something that could be worn just over them. Meanwhile, the girl, without saying a word and rotating, instantly breaks on running and at frantic speed escapes from the boy. A little later, a guy with glasses and a girl with short hair sit on a bench. The girl slowly pulls her cocktail and the guy just holds his hands. The girl is interested in asking why he decided to take the martial arts lessons from the Rhine. The young man explains that it is not just about curiosity. The real reason probably lies in the same event that happened in the academy's cafeteria. At that time, the Rhine locked him with him until Vermian was able to use magic and then beat it back. The young man sits on the bench and looks directly in front of him. He says he felt the image then. The girl looked at the boy in glasses in surprise. He confessed that then his body simply did not obey, and it was unacceptable to the magician. That is why he sought to become stronger. In addition, Weitzel confesses that the Rhine is admired. Millis applies his hand to the chest and silently agrees with each of his words. The girl slowly bowed to her cocktail, thinking about how much she is worried about her. In her eyes, anxiety prevails. She is clearly experiencing whether I stop choosing on it. Vermian approaches his friends and asks him to tell him more about what they had just discussed. He stands, crossing his hands on his chest, and carefully, as a scientist, looks at a girl with short hair and a boy in glasses. Millis wipes his chin and explains that today Ryan and Elria are not with them because they were called to the castle. Vernian, with the cold in his voice, notes that he was not interested in those two. The guy gets up and turns to Wiella, asking if he really takes the lessons in this commoners. Elria reassures everyone, they say. It's just rain, nothing unusual. It always helps them to understand everything about magic. Vermian wondered if they knew what the task would be in the situational exam this month. Viso replied that this time they would work in groups and prepare for a comprehensive exam, which is scheduled for the next month. Elria looked at Vermian and, slightly embarrassing and stumbling out in words, asked if he needed 5 people on the team. The next morning, Mila notices Elria and exclaims her name loudly. Elri and Rhine come into the room together. A girl with long hair holds the boy's hand. Melise is surprised to notice that Elria looks so cheerful in the morning. Visel also expresses surprise. Strange, but the girl does not shake at all as expected. Elria, with a smile, replies that in fact she is not as sleepy and slow as she is told. The girl says that the rain has prepared her milk tea, which is why she is so cheerful. Melissa is very surprised at home. Visal turns to the guy and asks how everything went in the castle. The Rhine replies that they attended a compulsory event, talked with the princess, and grateful from the residents of Elria. And yet, he adds, they advanced forward and in personal affairs. The Rhine remembers the words of the princess and suggests that if someone really stole magical power, then most likely it was done with the help of some technology from the future. In other words, one of the future may be involved in their reincarnation. The young man in glasses says that they have news. The girl approaches him and is interested in what happened to them. The young man sits at the table, shaking his head on his arms. Millis says that they need 5 people on the future exam. The Rhine agrees and notes that they just miss one person. Someone says they have already solved this problem. The Rhine looks forward, keeping a close eye on the conversation. The boy's face can be seen. The news from his friends does not like him. Vermian approaches the team and says that today is a wonderful morning, waving his hand and even smiles. The Rhine monitors him, standing his arms on his chest. The Rhine turns to the guy, asking if he often visited them, as if it were a common matter for him. He is not pleased with the appearance of this stranger. A clear discontent is clearly noticeable on the Rhine's face. Vermian reports that preparation for the future exam is already beginning, which is why it is here. A barely noticeable smile appears on Farron's face. The Rhine looks forward and seems to want to ask not to voice any information, but does not have time to agree. Elria stands side by side, staring forward with interest and bows his head slightly. Vernian reaches out and says they will now work together as a real team. A light smile appears on his face, and a confident look shows he believes in this union. The preliminary examination of the situations was not enrolled, because during it suddenly appeared armored dragons, which everyone was considered extinct. The Rhine then came into battle with one of them, holding a sharp sword, capable of cutting even magical creatures. Alma says that these armor dragons were considered such a threat to magic that destroyed them all to the last. Even animals that became their ancestors through mutations did not avoid this cruel fate. Therefore, it was decided that the next situational exam will take place in the format of training fights between teams of 5 people. In order to prepare for the exams, everyone gathered in the training field. The Rhine asks a girl who hugs him firmly whether she needs to hug him every time they see. The girl explains, if they come closer or interfere, then the area becomes smaller. Space decreases. Accordingly, there is less magical force and coordinate calculations. The Rhine asks if it is true. Millis and Guy in glasses move away and watch everything that is happening. Millis notes that such scenes have become familiar. Lasika is tempting and adding, in the classroom it does not surprise anyone. Frigg stated that Rin was not able to use any magic without Keldwin, and he could not do it himself. His eyes were closed, a barely noticeable smile wandered on his lips. The guy himself looked absolutely confident in his words. Elrius opened her eyes wide, looking at the Faraga, and he began to justify himself in his own words. The egg turns away, and replies that since the Rhine could not use magic from birth, you will not do anything. The Rhine asks the guy not to worry and behave as always. A few hours ago, Farag stated that once they were in one team, they should act together. He stopped in front of the Rhine, demonstrating his determination. Then the Rhine returned to Millis and said he heard. Several Farag's friends did not have time to return to the exam. Melissa has his eyebrows and notes that Farag was convinced that one of his classmates would invite him to join the team. The stranger turns his eyes, explaining that to accept the son of the family that is being despised here is too difficult for them. Behind his back stands a small group of people, and each of them silently lowers their heads. The girl looks over her shoulder and says that their team is already in full. The rest of the people standing nearby confirm her words. A young man with a smile on his face directly states that they do not want to see an egg on his team. Several people behind him are surprised to respond to such frankness. Melissa approaches the Rhine and reports that Farag remained at all. Meanwhile, Farag himself, standing a little distance, uses magic and screams loudly that he will now destroy a guy. Millis notes that Elria is very harsh, and she is interested in seeing whether the son of a rich family can withstand such trials. Farag confidently replies that he is not common people, so it will be easy. Both guys stand with their hands crossed on their chest, demonstrating their confidence. Millis confidently points to the boy with his finger and reminds that she warned him. If he starts grunting, she will not be ashamed to call him a weak family who is even worse than a simple guy. Frag looks forward with a serious and evil expression and warns that if it stands, it will call Millis a rural prostate worse than ordinary farmers. Millis only smiles widely and has fun that her family has long been engaged in animal husbandry. The young man in glasses and a girl with long hair stand away and watch. Lasika notes that he still has to pass the exam with these two. And Elria adds that he has to teach them everything he needs. Alma squats, squeezing her staff, lowered her head so low that her eyes are not visible. She says that a training battle with his highly priesthood promises to be exciting. The woman in the glasses stands next to Alma and says that the director herself said, "You need to be prepared for extreme situations and you do not do anything." A woman in glasses is a branch of Teresia. She is a magician of the first rank and a helper of the diamond. The branch notes that now people from different classes have gathered in this place, so you can expect any unexpected events. Alma lifts her gaze and, smiling slyly, tells the woman in glasses so that she joins a training combat. A woman in glasses, very excited, assures that she came here only as a mentor to help and teach. She adds that she does not have combat magic, as Alma does. Alma with a branch went on the road. Saying goodbye, Alma asked not to name her if she did something shameful. After all, if she lets down, as a person who recommended her for the role of the teacher, she will have to train without rest until the morning. The Rhine turns to its team and says it is time to take the case. But Millie warns, first everyone needs to clearly divide responsibilities. Melissa announces that Elria will now evaluate whether she can raise their level of training to a certain limit, and whether they will be able to stay in the first team is unknown. After the last exam, it became apparent that the half would almost probably be able to become a magician, so they decided to instruct her to teach other students. The Rhine says we need to create a team that a guy named Farag has. Valk and Lucas are not attending the academy now, so we will be exactly 5 with them. Frisha stands, crossing his hands on his chest and smiling widely. His appearance tells himself for himself. He will be the main one, and here someone on the side confirms it. The young man does not believe heard and once again asks the Rhine. He stands with his hands crossed on his chest, looks carefully at the guy and repeats confidently, "Everything will be exactly the way he said." He appeals to each of the 3 and asks whether they are ready to follow each of his words. These 3 look at the guy in surprise, opening their eyes wide. The Rhine, in a confusion in his hands, tries to refuse, He assures that no one is about to listen to his words. Pharaoh does not understand anything at all and asks what the Rhine refers. The Rhine orders the guy to listen carefully. She explains that the main task of the leader is to make decisions. The Rhine tells how he had to make a decision in a difficult situation during the attack of the dragon in the armor. Then he chose the escape, and it was right. He managed to save the wounded. It is the determination that distinguishes him from others. At a critical moment he acted better than many. The Rhine says that it owns the magic of the 8th level. So if it is given command and the right to make decisions during the battle, it will significantly affect the combat capabilities of the whole group. That is why Visel will command and make a decision. And Visel is wondered if the guy will be able to decide something at the beginning and in the final of the battle. Eloria says that he has long been thinking about a plan in which Melissa should be on the front line, but emphasizes that her own opinion is important. Melissa asks to share this plan to find out what he is. El Rhea begins to explain. While others are looking for a solution, Millis will have to repeat continuous attacks. Melissa approaches the boy and welcomes him to the fact that he has now become a leader. The guy looks at the girl and asks her to stop smiling like that. El Rhea notes that Farag will be difficult to stay ahead. El Rhea says that the stronger the person has, the less he wants to be on the front line. El Rhea further explains that these people are quite helpless in melee. The guy with the girl turns his eyes on Farah, and he gladly looks out, asks why they look at him so strange. The Rhine asks Ellie if she will not be against it if he is responsible for the guy. The girl assures that he does not mind, because in her opinion, he is better for all. Then the Rhine approaches the young man and asks to give him some magical item that will not be sorry to break. The young man corrects glasses and asks if the Rhine knows how much money really takes to create a magical artifact. The Rhine is slightly aware that no one will deliberately break this thing. Just if you put all your magical power into it, especially if it is something spherical, it can easily break. The young man in glasses confesses that he has a prototype who has not met his hope, and on his face can be seen a slight uncertainty. A sword appears in this Rhine's hands. He carefully inspects him and notes that the weapon is really not bad. Then the Rhine slightly takes the edge of the sword sideways and looks at the other side. In the end, he returns to Faraga and calmly reminds that it is time to start training. Farag stood before the Rhine and asked why he could teach him if he could not use magic. The Rhine confidently replied, "Even if I have no magical strength, I will fight as if I had." The Rhine puts the ball on the shoulder and says that if the Farag wins, he will fulfill any request, as far as it will be. The Farag smiles and looks away. He says it already sounds interesting and agrees to work out. Both boys stopped at a decent distance from each other, and the Rhine said that here you could not restrain themselves and show all the power of their magic. The Rhine says that it will wait a minute before attacking, so during this time Farag can do whatever he pleases. The young man asks if the Rhine really gives him a head start. Farag notes that the Rhine seems to be very confident. The Rhine confidently states that it does not believe in its defeat at all. Meanwhile, Farag acts forward, decisively preparing for the attack. Farah's back clearly glittered different magical objects. In the heat of the controversy, he exclaims that if he wins, he will no longer allow the Rhine to call him a boy. Farag warns that the Rhine does not think that this time he can just repel his magic as it was before. The Rhine is instantly rushing forward, running quickly and exclaiming that he can no longer wait for it to try it. A confident smile flies on the boy's face. He has no doubt about what he has. Bereg looks forward, surprised, and is about to ask something, but there is no time for it. The Rhine suddenly rushes forward and runs rapidly through these amazing magic balls. Rin squats, and suddenly a bright light flashes in front of him. That guy gets up and rushes to run at a frantic speed. Rin falls to the ground, sliding by a magical ball. His hand with force hits the floor. The Rhine easily rises and stands on one hand, confidently holding on. In the other hand, he squeezes his sword firmly. The Rhine rose to his feet and joked that he was very hot. The guy shoots skillfully, but cannot close all the vulnerable places. Without additional magic, he will not succeed. The Rhine touches his face with his face, throws his sword behind his back and asks whether the guy is being aimed here. The guy starts screaming sharply. His eyebrows shift in the angry grimace. He confirms loudly. Yes, he aims at where he showed the Rhine. The Rhine easily evades the guy's attack and mockingly says that such a blow is too simple to hit him. That's all your fast attack, nothing special. The guy stands, stretching the sword forward, and looks in front of himself with a formidable look. Rain still says that the young man himself understands everything. He explains, a fiery spear is only a bait, but in fact, a little different is hidden. The Rhine is skillfully waving his sword, evading the impact, and notes that the boy still controls the flames that he has hidden behind his back, in places where he does not see. The Rhine stands in front of Farag and says that the idea itself is not bad, but he still needs to work on his magical skill. Otherwise, through a loud crack that accompanies the flame, its attack will not be effective enough. Farag raises his head sharply, bristling his teeth, and asks what this rain means. It looks very angry. A large magical circle suddenly appears under the Ford egg, which draws a variety of characters. The Ford Jess stands in the heart and proclaims that it should be strong, not like everyone else. The face of Eggs is squeezed from rage. He wisely lifts the sword over his head and warns the Rhine, "Don't even think to do something with it." A thick layer of dust rises behind the young man when he calls for helping a bursting army of fire. The Rhine continues to be motionless, raising his head a little and looking up. He calmly points out that a minute has already passed. A light, confident smile appears on the Rhine's face. The Rhine embraces the sword in the ground behind itself, and with only one movement reflects the guy's attack. The expression of his face remains unchanged. For the Rhine, it is a trifle. The magical egg flies straight at him, and he shouts back. The Rhine does not seem and continues to fight the enchantments of the fabric. If he had a better sword, he would not have to face such danger. The Frigg is staring forward, sweeping and tightly clenching his teeth. His talent disappears in vain. Rain stubbornly resists the magic of the Frigg. He squeezes the sword in his hands and flips past the detachments of fire warriors. The Rhine land next to the Fargo sitting on the ground. He notes that his reactions work perfectly. Fargo explains that the Rhine still needs to work a little, and then he will be able to fully open himself in battle. The Rhine lowers the sword hanging behind the shoulder. He notes that Fareg sees the ability to master his fencing skill. The guy looks forward, widely revealing his eyes from surprise, and again asks the sword. Elria, Mill, and Wiesel stand away and watch the boys train. Elria notes that the Rhine is now a lot of fun, and Mill asks her to repeat it again. The young man corrects the glasses and notes that the Rain's still left alone with a guy who is a rich and influential family. Elri adds that Rains wanted to help Lord because he considered him a difficult child. Elria adds that in the previous life, no one taught the Rhine any combat techniques. Millis looks at the girl with surprise and asks, "Was the Rhine so strong, just knowing nothing?" Elbria believes that the Rhine not only received military training and combat skills, but also well mastered the strategy and the art of war. However, no one was able to absorb his unique style of battle perfectly. Therefore, Elbria believes that the Farby is the kind of man who is great for the Rhine. A girl with long hair notes that Farag is too bold, and so the Rhine wants to correct his character. Millis agrees with this, because it is so similar to the Rhine. Meanwhile, the guy in glasses is worried about his magical artifacts. A girl with long hair smiles widely and offers a training fight. At the same time, Elria stands side by side, baring her hands. Millis and Vale experience true fear. The girl confesses that the most frightened of her this feature of a girl with long hair. The young man cannot understand where Elria suddenly appeared such a strange desire to fight. Elria says, "If something hurts, you will never forget it and get it very quickly. This is the best and most effective way to learn." Malis does not believe that such words could be said by a wise man, and jokes, "Maybe you are not a sage, but a sergeant?" Suddenly, something big is appearing over the heads of 3 people. They all lift their views up. Some of them are wondering if someone from his class is here. A girl sitting on a dragon asks which they are from. Millis loudly replies that they are from the Eastern Tower. The dragon landed to the ground. The girl notes that the Western Tower is on the other side, and confesses that she did not believe Rafitza at first when she said that they needed to go here. The girl descends from the dragon, welcomes everyone, and reports that Rufus is Lilius from the Federation of Celios. The guy in glasses says that Celios is a country that is famous for the magic of the challenge, and it turns out that this girl is studying in the Western Tower. Millie adds that she was nicknamed the Princess Dragon, although she looks not more than 12 to 13. As soon as he arrived, the girl bowed her head slightly and looked intently forward. Everyone is surprised. Why does someone hide from her? The guy and the girl look at the sound and see Elria hiding behind the back of a short-haired girlfriend. Melissa rotates and notes that Elria has a strange habit of hiding from strangers. A light smile appears on Melissa's face. Rufus lifts his hands to the cheeks and exclaims enthusiastically that Elria reminds him of a small animal. At this point, Rufus looks especially sweet. Rufus begins to run circles, enthusiastically noting that the girl has very long and beautiful blonde hair. At the same time, she is wondering whether the entrance exam was also. Rufus runs closer to the girl and says that she has heard of an incredibly strong man, who is even called the embodiment of the sage, and was looking forward to getting acquainted with him at the academy. Rufus reaches out Ellery's hand and begins to press it so much that it immediately attracts attention. The jury thought that a girl was in front of him, and she confirmed. of course. Elria said that she heard about a child who managed to enter into an agreement with dragons, powerful session guards, and considered it incredible, because they were always expelled from all cases. For the first time learning this story, it was amazed, because this happened very rarely. You can see them with your own eyes. Rufus smiles widely, closing his eyes with joy. She says that all 4 dragons are now nearby. Entenkale quietly falls asleep on soft clouds. Malawi slowly drifts the sea, enjoying the comfort of waves. Fremovid is happy to roll over a hot bench, and Magnafimo is heated in the sun among the wide plains. Elri says that the appearance of this captivates it. Melissa agrees enthusiastically. This is really cool, and she also dreams of at least once in her life to go abroad. Rufus says that the most important thing for her is this baby. She approaches the dragon and gently hugs him. The dragon in response makes pleasant sounds. A girl with long hair asks Rufus if this dragon belongs to steel dragons. Rufus is surprised where she got such information from. Elria adds that she does not know the scientific name of this creature. Rufus explains that it is a fire, a special kind of large flying dragons. Some of the audience wonder how quickly Rufus recognized this dragon and immediately answered. Rufus embraces the dragon's muzzle and says with a smile, he and Rafi are inseparable, friends since childhood. Rufus approaches Elor and is wondering whether she knows how to control the magic of the 10th circle, and then again asks whether she uses the spell. Millis says that nothing is wrong if Elria continues the conversation by forgetting their quarrel. The guy adds that she should not worry about whether this conversation will be useful for someone. Elray, with the sight of fatigue, looks at his friends. Rufus is wondering if they are going to arrange a training fight. Elray replies that she plans to have a good time playing with these two. Rufus looked at Elria and challenged her. Beat me. Rufus is curious with interest that she would like to see Elrias' magic. She confidently adds that together with Rafik, they will not yield to any opponent who would not be in front of them. Rufus stands in front of Eloria, and the dragon stands behind it. Rufus asks Elorius if she would like to spend a training fight with him. The Elias agrees, and looking at these two friends, confesses that she wants to knead her legs a little. A large gray wolf named Shafris suddenly emerges behind Elria's back. Rufus recognizes a wolf that devours magic. She is genuinely surprised that Elria generally remembered Tamia, because even the myceliosis itself failed to conquer him. Elria says that this wolf is very smart and understands that it will not be able to overcome it. Therefore, he stands behind the girl, and his mouth is wrapped in strong chains. Rufus stands next to their dragon, and they look forward together. Smiling, Rufus says it will be fun. The girl, on the first attempt, cleverly jumps on her dragon. Rufy straightens the wings and prepares for takeoff. Rufus and Rufy fly into the sky, rapidly rising into the air. The girl, without holding back emotions, screams the dragon to attack. Meanwhile, Elria and Shefri remain on the ground, watching carefully at how they fly. The young guy in the glasses lifts his head in surprise and notes that it is extremely high speed, and Rufus has already taken a favorable position. Millis calls Elria by name. Elria looks at his magic beast, calls him by name and commands him to move forward. The wolf breaks rapidly from the place. Its sharp fangs shine in the rays of light. Rufus rotates and says with confidence that the wolf will not be able to get so high. The wolf begins to bounce up the zigzags. Rufus, hanging in the air with the dragon without even touching the ground, looks down and asks what this boil repels. Rufus thinks that this wolf is extremely sensitive to magical power. He feels the energy of Elria, and as soon as there is a place where you can push away, jumps forward. Rufus straightens and exclaims loudly, ordering the rod to burn the entire perimeter with fire. A paddy girl with tails looks confident and focused. Rufy raises the head, and a fire erupts from her mouth. Elria exclaims to his Skacha, ordering him to wait. Shefri lifts his head and looks up carefully. At the same time, Rafa bows his head to the ground and begins to exhale the flames. Rufus swirls one eye and covers his face with his palm, doubting that air pressure can become a support. At this time, Elria, having suffered, calls on the Sheffer not to delay and move forward. The wolf jumps on the back of the dragon, and the girl in Rafika turns around and looks at this beast with surprise. The dragon falls rapidly, and the Sheferi still holds on his back. Rufus screams Rufika so that she does not panic. Elria stands a little sideways and watches the place where Rafus and Rufus have fallen with great force. Millis with anxiety asks if everything is fine in Rufus, and the young man in glasses ironically states that Illyria, as always, is quite helpless. Rufus stands next to the dragon, gently stroking him on his head and saying his name. Meanwhile, Elria calls to himself Shefri and orders to approach. The wolf approaches the girl, and she praises the layers for a well-done work, and calls him an obedient dog. El Rhea sits next to the wolf and says he is a good time, because he was waiting patiently. At this time, please look out of her hiding place and quit. They say, it seems to be the Shafiri about El Rhea. El Briere goes to his feet, looks at her animal and says that it feeds on magical energy. El Rhea returns to Rufus and asks her to stop Raffi. A girl with long hair explains that the Sheffer has absorbed too much magical power, and Raffi's soul may not withstand it. Rufus stands next to the dragon, putting his hand on him, and confidently says that their path has not yet ended. Refuse, with anger of skewed face and faded eyebrows, confidently states that her dragon never loses to anyone. Sheffrey expanded his eyes, scattering sharp teeth. He became before El Rhea and Grolans, closing them. The dragon Rufus releases a powerful stream of flame, directing it straight forward. Sheffrey rushes forward, closing El Rhea himself. He takes all the fire. El Rhea with despair exclaims the name of his beast. El Rhea pulls his hands in front of him. Her eyebrows are shifted from tension. She does not look forward, and in her eyes, a barely noticeable glare of horror. El Rhea froze in place, stretching her arms along with the staff. She looked directly in front of her, and sadness was red on her face. The girl with long hair scolded and shouted the name Rufus, reproaching him that he had gone too far. El Rhea explains that the body of the wolf is made of magical power, so it cannot die. However, such powerful blows during the battle will only restore his soul, and this does not suit the enemy at all. Rufus looks forward and says that for her this test is no different from a real battle. El Rhea calls a girl named. Rufus begins to say that he wants to do something with a schedule, but does not have time to contract. They are sharply interrupted by someone else. Suddenly, a pillar grows between the dragon and the girl, which is rolled into the ground, dividing them. A girl with 2 pigtails rotates and looks at the column in surprise, asking what it is and where it came from. At this point, behind the guy in glasses and lemon balm appears a woman named Branch, also in glasses. She is a little worried and, stamped, apologizes for her unexpected visit. Suddenly, someone's hand lies with Ellery on his head. The girl is a little surprised. Her eyes were wide open. The person to whom this hand owns is quietly confessing that he called a Branch. Elia lifts her head and notices Iron, who has just come and looks at a girl with a warm smile. The Branch explained that, as far as she understood, it was a demonstrative match. But if the battle continues, magical beasts on the roof could be seriously affected, so she suggested that the fight stop. The Branch, despite the fact that Rufus is ready to deny her, we continue the conversation. The Rhine turns to the girl, calling her a princess dragon, and asks to listen carefully. The Rhine says that if Rufus really wants to know which one is stronger, she will have to leave this time. Is it worth the risk of your precious dragons for one victory? The girl with his tails rotates to her dragon and gently addresses him. The dragon lies, putting his head on the ground and looks carefully at his mistress. Rufus sits opposite the dragon and thanks him. The dragon gradually begins to dissolve, and the girl wishes him good rest. Rufus rises to his feet and says calmly that it does not matter at what price the victory is. Standing with a bowed head, he adds that the most important thing for them is victory. Rufus turned and went quietly, leaving the team behind. Everyone watched her silently, and sympathy flashed on the faces. After a while in a large house, El Rhea sits on a soft sofa in the spacious hall. He serves a cup of tea by Julia and notes that today she looks even more thoughtful than always. El Rhea takes the cup and stays on the couch, and next to it stands the Rhine, which quickly drains its drink. El Rhea finally confesses that she thought about Rufus. The Rhine said that when he looked at the dragon princess, he was covered by a sense of nostalgia. El Rhea lifted her gaze as if she mentioned something, and again asked what he meant by this nostalgia. The Rhine tells that in Altena, it was considered familiar when children became soldiers. The children themselves understood perfectly. It was only a convenient reason to get rid of them. Therefore, they tried to achieve something to survive. The Rhine noted that the princess dragon had the same facial expression as those children. The young man, sighing and feeling the burden on his heart, descends on the chair. He explains that it is only his assumption. He then says that this girl seems to come to the academy, carrying a lot of time and firmly deciding to achieve something important. The young man looks forward and remembers that he wanted to ask a girl with long hair. The boy asks if it was the same small beast that Julia called last time. Hearing how Elor says that he gives the beast magical power and gratitude, the baby creating quietly makes a joyful sound. El Rhea explains that the bodies of such monsters are made of magical energy, so if they become smaller, then magic costs decrease. However, the guy sighs. In his opinion, they look not amazing at all.